everyone, friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, we've got Ky McKeon aboard. He does an amazing job over at the 3-Man. We've taken a look at this great game of basketball that we all know and love. We're going to get some of his early season takeaways as he was actually there for the old Champions Classic that was down in Chicago. He was able to see the Michigan State Duke game. He was able to see Kansas versus Kentucky. So we'll get his thoughts on those 4 teams. We're also going to be diving into a few handicapping angles that he's got now that we are really getting into these neutral court games, these non-conference tournaments with the Myrtle Beach Classic, with the Charleston Classic, all starting up on Thursday. So get some thoughts there and a few picks for this Thursday card. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of 2 ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did get one in today from Joseph Austin Mann, who has actually been a follower of mine for quite some time. So Joseph, you are very much appreciated, my friend. I see you chiming in from time to time, so appreciate you being with us from the front. But he was asking, where should we go for some college basketball injury updates? Because I know that a lot of you guys use the same little hub that I did, the Fantasy College Basketball feed, which I know that the person that ran that, I think his name is Dave. I actually got him on the podcast once or twice. Great guy. He's now over doing some work at Unabated with regards to their college football work, and he's a great guy. So a loss for all of us college basketball fans, but where to look for college basketball news, for injury updates, things like this. And if there's 2 good, I would say, hubs with regards to Twitter/X to take a look at, I go to RotoWire CBB, and that's their Twitter/X handle at RotoWire CBB. They do a relatively solid job of posting up some updates. And then if you've ever heard of this man, Jordan Majeski, hopefully I said that correctly, but I know he used to be over at Action Sports HQ for quite a while. He contributes a little bit with Mid-Major Madness. You also might know him from his website, staringatfloorboards.com. He does an incredible job of taking a look at so many of these college basketball injuries, just picking off some of these lineups where he's like, yeah, something's not looking right here. I'm getting my spidey sense on. He does a really, really good job of being able to evaluate that. But I would say even bigger than that, there's no 1 or 2 accounts that is going to be able to get you all the college basketball injury information that you do need. If there is a team in question, if there's a just player in general in question, Twitter/X always has a search bar. I would just type in the player, the team, what have you, in question into Twitter/X, do a little bit of a Google search. These teams usually do have a little bit of a fan forum as well. Checking those forums, even though it sounds very old school, actually can give you some good information. It's how I found out Michael Ealy was out for Siena. So I do think that those are the sorts of things that you do want to be taking a look at for college basketball injury information. Those 2 accounts are very solid, but do be making a little bit of a Google, a Twitter/X search. That'll be in your advantage as well. So hopefully that was able to help you out. And trust me, I know how difficult it is just in college sports in general with no injury updates, with no injury reports. It does get to be brutal, and it is a little bit of a labor of love. So hopefully that helps you guys out. And now let's take a look back at everything that we saw very late Tuesday into Wednesday. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
A little bit of cleanup from late Tuesday in the old Champions Classic. It was a win but no cover for Kansas, at the very least on the closing number. The opening number was actually 4.5, 89-84. We're going to talk more about this game with Ky McKeon, so I'm not going to dive too much into this, but Kentucky held in there despite the fact that DJ Wagner and Antonio Reeves went a combined 8 of 37 from the floor, which I was actually very impressed with that. Kentucky, they go 12 of 38 from 3-point range. Off the bench, you had 4 of 5 with regards to the three-point shooting performance from Rob Dillingham. He was solid and then got a double-double out of Abdou Thiero. Hopefully I said that correctly. Meanwhile, for Kansas, Hunter Dickinson, 21 rebounds, 27 points. And then Kevin McCullough with a triple-double. So just an insane, fun game. You saw Iowa also get a cover, but Creighton, they get the outright win over Iowa, 92-84, as the offense in this game was just up and down. It was frenetic, as for Creighton, they go 10 of 29 from three-point range. Baylor Shireman, Trey Alexander combined for 40 points. Alexander, 1 assist shy of a triple-double in his own right. And hey, credit where credit is due for Iowa. The Valparaiso transfer, Ben Krikke, 24 points. Iowa looked a little bit better on the road than they have in past seasons, so that was big for them. And then UC Irvine, Zot for the Anteaters. Shout out Ian McMillan. They get it done against USC, 70-60. This is a case where USC was dealing with quite a few injuries. They just got back Vincent Iwuchukwu, who was dealing with an injury, but as they gain him, they lose Joshua Morgan for this game as well. And for UC Irvine, they did a great job of putting the clamps down on USC, who went just 4 of 21 from three-point range. Isaiah Collier delivered 23 points, but he also delivered 7 turnovers, while UC Irvine as a team had 9 turnovers to be able to get the job done there. What else is getting the job done? The DK Network write-up picks. As we were able to get this one into the window, we had the under in the Boston College versus Richmond game. Fortunately, I also had the points with Richmond, so a little bit tough there, but 68-61. Boston College, they are able to get to the window as Boston College, 7 of 18 from three-point range, with Quentin Post holding it down in the post. He did have 6 turnovers, but 17 points, 10 boards, 5 assists, all sorts of great versatility there for Boston College. They win the rebound battle 44-31, and Neil Quinn did his best for Richmond, 21 points, but for Richmond, despite the fact that they won the turnover battle 11-5, losing that rebound battle, and also coming back to earth with regards to their three-point shooting, going just 5 of 19 from three-point range. That did doom them. For the second straight year, Central Michigan, as a 17-plus point underdog, able to get a very nice outright win. This time they pick off South Florida, as South Florida looks like it might be a little bit of a long year for them, as they fall by a count of 68-63. For Central Michigan, they were able to go 8 of 15 from three-point range. Big game from Anthony Pritchard, the Tulsa transfer. He did have 3 turnovers, but 21 points, 5 assists, 6 boards. And for Central Michigan, they got a little bit fortunate on this. I'm not going to lie. Now, South Florida did go 26 of 31 at the free throw line, but 1 of 17 from three-point range. They just could not hit anything at all. Central Michigan actually lost the rebound battle by a count of 36-35 in the turnover battle, 17-11. But South Florida, as cold as an igloo, Chris Youngblood able to supply 20 points, but that's all that the team had going right for them, and it was a bad night for the American in general, as you also had East Carolina lose as a double-figure favorite. They fall to USC Upstate, 83-81, as for East Carolina, R.J. Felton goes 5 of 7 from 3, 9 rebounds, 33 points. You also had 24 points out of Ezra Usar. Past that, you really didn't get anything out of anyone else, so that was rough. And Brandon Johnson did not play in this game as well. That was big for East Carolina. And you had Trey Borneau be able to supply 20 points for USC Upstate. They were able to do a solid job winning the turnover battle by a count of 14-12 as well, so they're able to get it in there. We shall see how Rice is able to do in the lone ranked matchup of the night. Texas, the number 19 team in the country, currently up 41-32 as they do this at halftime. Rice went just 2 of 10 from three-point range, while Texas 6 of 11 from 3, but Rice is actually holding in this game as they've been able to get a little bit out of Max Fiedler, just 3 assists, 2 points, but he's been able to find Anthony Selden, who's been able to give the team 9 points, so we shall see how that game progresses as things go along. I'll have a little bit of cleanup on the podcast tomorrow. This is a game that probably isn't going to require a lot of cleanup as I do this podcast. Rutgers currently taking it to Georgetown 54-36 midway through the second half, with Rutgers going currently 9 of 20 from three-point range. Andre Hyatt looked very solid to begin the year. 12 points, 6 boards for Georgetown. I do think that Ed Cooley is going to be able to get things online. And early on, Dontrez Styles, 15 big points, being able to make 3 out of his first 4 threes, but it looks like this is very much a work in progress team. Seeing all, I would consider them a little bit of a work in progress team as well, but they got it done, a win and cover over Albany, 96-71. Something else that we're going to be talking to Ky McKeon about, these 20-plus point favorites and the way that they have been covering thus far this season as 4 seed and all. They go just 5-14 from three-point range, but Elamir Dallas is able to chip in their 15 points off the bench. You had a trio of different guys be able to log at least 10 points as you're able to get 10 points out of Malachi Brown. You were able to get 13 solid points out of Isaiah Coleman, and then coupled with that, you're able to have a nice performance of 10 points as well out of Jaquan Sanders. Meanwhile, Albany looks like they're going to be a little bit overmatched moving forward this season, though. They were able to get a good 21-point performance out of Amari Marshall, I believe was over at Hofstra. If you, like me, had nickels on the money line / laying a very small amount of points, this was brutal. I had nickels, I took them, and they were up 18 points in the first half, and they lose to Denver, 91-85, as Denver goes 11-29 from three-point range. And this is the second straight game in which Nichols got up 18-plus points and blew the lead. Fortunately, they were able to come back in that game against LSU, but man, not great there. But Tuku Tanemo, hopefully I said that correctly, for Denver, 23 points, 11 rebounds. He was able to be the best low post player in this game. And for Nichols, they win the turnover battle by kind of 11-9, but cooled down after a very hot shooting start, and they blow a rather big lead. So that was a little bit less than terrific. Louisville was able to get their first cover of the year. They take down Cobbett State at 17-point favorites, 61-41, and what was a complete and utter eyesore of a game. Cobbett State goes 3 of 17 from three-point range. Reason why Louisville was able to cover, they were able to have down low Trey White give them a double-double, 10 points, 12 rebounds. Brendan Huntley Hatfield was also able to log 7 boards as well. And for Cobbett State, they played even up with regards to turnovers, just could not get a shot to drop. They went 28% from the floor. So if you missed that game, you really didn't miss too much. For Princeton versus Duquesne, this was a little bit of a better matchup. And for Princeton, they're now 3-0 with wins over Rutgers, Hofstra, and Duquesne. That is a very good resume right now. 70-67. Princeton proving that Sweet 16 run might not have been a fluke, as Matt Aloko went a loco, 23 points for Princeton. They were able to play even up with regards to the rebound battle. They lost the turnover battle just a little bit, but for Duquesne, just 7-21 from three-point range. J.D. Grant, you get 16 points, but went just 1 of 7 from three-point range. In Princeton, they were able to do a relatively solid job with Caden Pierce being able to log 8 rebounds, and Xavion Lee chipped in their 20 points. So a massive win for Princeton. Ohio State, another one of those teams that was laying a big number. They get the win. They get the cover over the old Merrimack by a count of 76-52. Do be noting that Merrimack currently dealing with a big-time injury to Jordan DeCock. He did not play in this game. That is arguably their top player. They did have a 6 of 9, very nice three-point shooting performance from Devin Savage to be able to give the team 20 points, but that said, not a lot going on. And for Ohio State, just 13 turnovers in this one. If Merrimack is not generating 15-plus turnovers, typically they are doomed. And Cornell, they were doomed in this one against George Mason, 90-83. I actually do think that there's quite a bit of upside with this George Mason team, as they went 9 of 22 from three-point range. And for Cornell, they actually shoot 14 of 29 from three. Very concerning when you lose, going 14 of 29 from three-point range. But the reason why they lost, they lose the rebound battle 37-32 as Keyshawn Hall, nice double-double, comes over from UNLV. I think UNLV could use him right about now. 29 points, 12 rebounds out of him. And Nebraska, a nice winning cover over Stony Brook by a count of 84-63, as Rink Mass has been really a go-to guy for Nebraska. Filled it up once again, 14 points, 8 boards, 5 assists. But Kasai Shomanaga, he's now back after a little bit of an early season injury. Goes 7-11 from the floor. He's always open to scoring. And on top of that, Jawan Gary, he made his season debut as well after he missed the back half of last season. Big-time contributor for Nebraska off the bench, 19 points. So you are seeing some teams getting some guys back at the fold, and those are always very, very important to be taking note of. And what I am also taking note of is the betting trends that we're currently seeing in college basketball. As overs have been hitting like wildfire. We're starting to see things come back just a skoge for these unders. We have seen 53.3% of games go over the total thus far this season, 220 overs, 193 unders. So I have a few games pending for the Wednesday card as I record this, but what has really been hot as well, home teams covering 52.6% of games, 216, 195, and 7 against the spread for home team's favorites. They're on a relatively similar crash course, 213, 198, and 7 against the spread. That's good for 51.8%. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on a tremendous Wednesday. Now let's take a look at Thursday. Let's take a look back at the Champions Classic, and let's just get a feel for how to handicap these games on neutral courts with Ky McKeon. He does tremendous work over at the three-man weave, and he joins me next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man. As a matter of fact, it's great to be joined by any of these gentlemen over at the three-man weave, who you're able to follow on Twitter/X at the number 3MW_CBB. Today it is Ky McKeon who's joining me. He does such a great job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. I know that he did a great job with the Almanac. He also does some work over at Field of 68 Action Network. List goes on and on. To follow him on Twitter/X, that is at the letters KNY_ and then the number 3MW all together. And Ky, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Ky. And Ky, I know that you were at the Champions Classic on Tuesday. You were able to see both of those events up close and in person. And I do want to get your takeaways from really all four of the teams that you were able to see, because I felt like my biggest takeaway from the Champions Classic is that even though Kentucky lost, with the way that just Antonio Reeves was unable to knock down a shot, DJ Wagner could not buy a bucket to save his life, the fact that Kentucky was still in that game was actually rather impressive to me.
Yeah, definitely. They proved to be a little better than I thought they were heading into the game. And a lot of that had to do with Tiero, a guy I wasn't too familiar with, who played fantastic. I think he had a double-double. And then Dillingham, fantastic freshman off the bench, got red hot. Definitely some negatives from Kentucky. For instance, Justin Edwards and DJ Wagner pretty much no-showed the game. You know, Dickinson kind of had his way inside as we kind of expected, but overall, to play Kansas, who might be the best team in the country, that close, for the entire 40, was truly impressive. This team's clearly talented, right? Calipari's been around the block, so it's a dangerous squad that I think will be better than I expected initially in the SEC.
Yep, and there always are surprises to the positive and the negative, and I'm with you. I thought that Kentucky was going to be a little bit more raw, and especially with Bradshaw being out of the fold as well. That's going to be a little bit of an elevator when they're able to get him as well. I thought that was a big takeaway for me. And are there a few other teams that, now that we're through about a week and a half of the season, that maybe you're a little bit more stock up on, whether you've seen them in person, whether you've just been following their games, betting on/against them? Are there just a few teams in general that early on during the season, they've been raising your eyebrow a little bit?
Yeah, I think Michigan's for real. That was a team that I was pretty high on, actually, coming into the year. So far, they've delivered my expectations. They look great. They look to fit a lot better than last season. Clearly, there's more chemistry amongst these guys. Kamwa has been fantastic, one of the best transfers in the country. Doug McDaniel's taken that sophomore leap that we all hoped he would at the point guard spot. And Nimari Burnett, he kind of reminded everybody that he was a really, really well-regarded prospect coming out of high school. He's just been hurt during his college career, and he's delivering so far. So really everything's pointing the right direction for Michigan. And even when Howard gets back, I have a lot of respect for Martelli, but even when Howard gets back, I expect Michigan to kind of continue to be a very, very good team.
Yep, I think so as well. And dare I say, I feel like this team has actually been a little bit better under the tutelage of Phil Martelli as well. Their system just looks very, very crisp right now. So in full agreement there, as Ky McKeon, who does tremendous work over at the three-man weave, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ky, we've seen a lot of games involving harebrained 20-plus point spreads. We've seen a few competitive games. You were certainly up close and in person for what we all saw out there in Chicago on Tuesday. That's always really nice. But now we're getting into the part of the schedule where we get those multi-team events, we get those neutral court games as things are getting going in the great state of South Carolina with the Myrtle Beach Invitational, the Charleston Classic on Thursday as well. And how do you handicap more of these neutral court games? Because I always find myself year in and year out leaning a little bit more on unders when it comes to these sorts of games.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to look at it. I would say unpredictable is what I've kind of taken away from these MTEs. It seems every year it's kind of the unexpected happens, unless you get a situation like PK85 last season where UConn was clearly the most dominant team. You know, they covered every spread by a significant margin. You knew that you could bet on UConn and be pretty confident in the result. But otherwise, these smaller ones, you know, teams are still working stuff out. We have a very small sample size so far of how good teams across the country actually are. There's certainly lucky shooting nights and unlucky shooting nights in the first couple of games, and that can all turn around during the MTs. So I would probably exercise caution when betting and really, you know, dig in as much as you can because it's kind of tough to peg.
Yep, it really is tough to peg. And are you someone that tries to take a look at a little bit of the, for lack of a better term, arena history of some of these multi-team events as well? Because, I mean, man, it's really unfortunate that we don't have the Maui Invitational actually in Maui. It's good that they kept it in the state of Hawaii. But I would always remember wanting to take a few more overs with regards to that event because you always have the soft rims where it felt like anything even remotely close to the rim, it was always going in that tournament. Meanwhile, I take a look at a tournament that we're going to be seeing in about a week and a half or so in the Battle for Atlantis. And I don't know why, but it feels like they've got like the hardest rims on the face of planet Earth. Anything that's even remotely close is going to be going out. Is that a little bit of an angle that you take as well? Or am I maybe just trying to deep dive a little bit too much on that?
No, I think so. Certain venues probably trend towards an over or an under. Can't fully rely on trends. They can definitely get burned in a bad way because at the end of the day, it's still a small sample size in the grand scheme of things, and things can change year to year. And maybe venues that had underleans in the past, maybe those kind of start to go away a little bit, at least because of the new rules, the block charge calls. We've seen a lot of overs lately. It's good to know. It's good to kind of look at the history, but I wouldn't fully rely on it as the sole reason for a bet.
Yep, and I think that that's a good way of taking a look at things as well. You certainly want to be taking a look a little bit at it. I don't think that you could just completely ignore it, but at the same time, if you're like, I expect these teams to score 80 points apiece, now that they're playing in this venue, it's going to be a 55-53 slobber knocker or something like that. You're probably went a little bit too far as well as Ky McKeon, who does absolutely tremendous work over at the Three Man Weave, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ky, another takeaway that I've had from the beginning part of the season, I'm not sure if you've been taking a look at this as well, but it does feel like these big favorites of, I think, a good arbitrary cutoff numbers, a 17 or more point favorite, 2 touchdowns and a field goal. I feel like these teams have just really been cover machines thus far this season. We haven't seen too many competitive games when the spread gets north of 17, and it's been really good to lay these points, in my opinion. I'm not sure if that's been a little bit of a takeaway of yours, but I find that to be very interesting because typically I get scared off by these big numbers, but those have laid it, I feel like, have been rewarded in droves thus far.
Yeah, it seems like it's always one or the other. Big dogs cover a lot during the year, or big favorites, and this year it's big favorites. The reason, I'm not sure. Again, maybe the new rules kind of lend towards home teams a little bit more. You get a friendlier whistle. Maybe these big favorites are really looking to get out of the gate quickly and put the pedal to the metal this season, and maybe it's happenstance that certain teams that are getting caught in these situations are going through a lot of turnover, going through a lot of different changes. But yeah, for whatever reason, big favorites have been pretty good to start the season.
Yeah, it has been something that I've been picking up on as well. And how do you just take a look at the landscape of college basketball? Because while we have seen a lot of upsets this year, obviously James Madison manufacturing the one over Michigan State, it feels like night in and night out, we have been seeing 1 or 2 of these double-figure underdogs being able to win outright. Santa Clara over Sanford, which honestly wasn't too surprising if you know the track record of Jared Haas. That's just me. But I do take a look at the landscape of college basketball. I think the divide between the top and the bottom is actually quite substantial because, like, your bottom 10, 15 teams in college basketball, it just feels like they are really, really bad. But I think that when you get those middling teams, like Team 20 going up against Team 70, that feels like it's a tighter differential this year than it has been in past years as well.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot more parity at the top, or rather middle to the top this season. A lot of that's because of the transfer portal. A lot of that's because of the extra year from COVID. Those are definitely 2 factors in kind of widening the talent across the country. But you're right, there are some dregs this season. Teams towards the bottom of the country are hurting, and the talent discrepancy between them and the middle to the upper class teams is stark, and that's probably one of the main reasons that we're seeing so many blowouts early on.
Yeah, it has been really interesting to gauge that because it's almost hard to describe because it's like, well, the top teams are blowing out the bottom teams, but at the middle, there's just a big giant load of meh, but you know what? That's sort of where we're at in college basketball right now. It's Ky McKeon, who does great work over at the Three-Man Weave, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do have to ask about this one because we have to take a look at the alma mater of one Jim Root here with Missouri taking on Minnesota. I know that you gentlemen over at the Three-Man Weave have quite a bit of affinity for Missouri. And right now as we're doing this, we're finding Missouri as a 2-point favorite with total on this game in the low to mid 140s, give or take, depending upon where you get the number. And I do want to get your thoughts on this game because with Minnesota, the team has looked relatively solid in the first 2 games of the season, but I don't take too much out of wins over UTSA and Bethune-Cookman. And I think the fact that Connor Vanover is going to be making his debut for Missouri should be a big difference maker. And I don't know if that was taken into account with regards to some of Missouri's early lines versus the one right now, because I think that he should be worth multiple points to a line.
He definitely could be. It's going to be tough to tell. I expect him to start and play a lot, but you never know. I wouldn't be surprised if Gates kind of put him into the lineup slowly, but it's not like he's coming off an injury. He's been able to practice and everything like that. But he could be a real difference maker on both ends. Number one, Mizzou has no interior size to speak of, and he brings that. He brings a shot blocker. He's skinny, but he can block shots. He's the Summit Defensive Player of the Year. And offensively, he can space the floor. He can really shoot and give Mizzou a 5-out lineup, which they play anyways, but with size. And he could definitely be a difference maker. I'm a little bit nervous about Minnesota. You know, the Barnes can be a tough place to play. Ben Johnson is kind of smart about game planning and taking the air out of the ball, but I do lean towards the Tigers. I don't love to bet on Mizzou as a faithful Tiger alum, but it'd definitely be my lean right now.
Yeah, and to your point, you were mentioning it a little bit earlier, home teams have covered north of 53% of spreads to begin the season, so that is something that does have me a little bit cautious. And I know you were alluding to this a little bit earlier on during our chat as well, that you do take a look at a lot of these games with regards to like the Myrtle Beach Invitational, the Charleston Classic, and they do get a little bit harder to predict. But is there a game or two that you're taking a look at in regards to these tournament games that we are going to be getting for Thursday that catch your attention, whether it be just a game that you want to kick back, watch, learn a little bit more about the team, or is there a better two to be had on these games?
Definitely intrigued by St. John's in North Texas. I want to know what St. John's is. Is Michigan awesome? I tend to think they are. Or is St. John's just not as good as many expected? I think it's a bit of that. I think they got overrated. They're overrated in the market for sure. This spread on KenPom here is 1. I think the market's like 3 right now for St. John's. They're probably going to take money every game. They're very well known amongst all casual college basketball fans. Everyone knows Rick Pitino's there. But North Texas is tough. I watched them against Northern Iowa. They're just as good defensively as they were last year. Aaron Scott's a star. I'm not sure they're going to shoot 45% from 3 the entire year, but it's a really tough team. It's a tough underdog. So I'm intrigued by the matchup.
I am as well, and with the St. John's team, I do have a feeling that this is going to be one of those teams that they might struggle early and then be able to rise up late as well, just with having pretty much a brand new look team. You've got a new coach. You've got pretty much everyone other than Joel Soriano coming into the fold as well. And how do you take a look at some of those teams as well? Because I think that Arkansas is always that prime example of a team that they struggle a little bit early, but when it comes to the games that count in February or March, they find their footing. And I could see St. John's sort of being in that same vein where they perhaps take their losses. We saw them take that lump against Michigan earlier on during the week, but I do think that this is a team that, as the season goes along, they should become a little bit more trustworthy.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think a lot of the early struggles will be because it is a brand new team. It's a bunch of new pieces, transfers. It'll take some time. I fully trust Pitino to get them going. So I agree. It's going to be a much better team as we get closer to March. Absolutely.
And what is always a great team, whether that be in June, whether that be in March, whether that be in May, that'd be you guys over at the Three-Man Weave. Ky, you're a big part of that team. You do amazing work taking a look at this great game of college basketball. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can catch us on Twitter at 3MW_CBB. We're doing weekly podcasts and weekly best bet shows on our YouTube channel. That's the Three-Man Weave.
And Ky, everyone else over there at the Three-Man Weave, Jim, Matt, they always do a tremendous job. It's always great to get any of those three gentlemen aboard today. It was Ky that joined me, sharing just his wealth of knowledge with this great game of college basketball. So big thanks to Ky for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. They give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some big shots. to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by Ky McKeon. He does great work over at the three-man. We've taken a look at this tremendous game of college basketball. He, Jim, and Matt are a really good trio every single time any of those three gentlemen join this podcast. I always feel like we get smarter. Ky always delivers whenever he's on this podcast, so big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. And now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNet_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then the games with 6 digits are going to be at the bottom. Those are extra games involving smaller conferences like the America East, the MAC, the SWAC. You're able to take a look at like the Big South, Patriot League. Probably forgot 1 or 2 conferences of Southland, so that's what the extra games are. But without further ado, let's dive in on this first game. It is 7:13, 7:14 on the betting board. Air Force is going to be playing against Lindenwood. Lindenwood is an underdog of between 16 and 16.5 points total on this game, and between 129 and 130. And for Lindenwood, I can only set them as an 11-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Been a rough transition going from the non-D1 level up to the D1 level for Lindenwood, but it's not been great for Air Force the last few seasons as well. Air Force really just doesn't have a lot of rebounding. They need Josh Corbin to really get back to being what he was towards the beginning of the 2022-23 season. Got off to a tremendous start to the season, then just got lost in the shuffle, and is still, quite frankly, lost in the shuffle. Meanwhile, you do have on the flip side for this Lindenwood team a little bit of a lack of size of their own as they're relying upon David Ware to be able to give the team rebounds. He has been able to supply about 6.5 rebounds per contest. That is something that you do like to see, but only about 3.5 points per contest. Could use a little bit more there. And then you do have for Lindenwood, Keenan Cole has been able to give the team 17 points per contest. You tell that they're missing Chris Childs, one of their top scorers from seasons ago after he just ran out of eligibility. But I do think that for Lindenwood, they're going to be able to improve upon the fact that they have shot just 23.2% from three-point range. I'm not saying that this is going to be some great knockdown shooting team, but at the same time, you're going up against an Air Force team that, while they play super-duper slowly, and you take a look at the raw numbers itself, and they're not giving up a whole ton of points or anything like that, it's really not that great of a defense. They're a middle-of-the-road team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. They're forcing 9.3 turnovers per contest. I like what Ethan Taylor has been able to do for this team, logging about 20 points, 4.5 assists, 6 rebounds per game after he was a primary scorer from a season ago. Bo Becker is a guy that's able to knock down a few threes as well. Last year shot about 34% from 3 with 7.5 points per contest. But other than really Rightus Petreitis a season ago, they didn't have a single guy that logged north of 5 rebounds per game, and he has not taken the floor thus far this season, so there's really no rebounding advantage whatsoever for this Air Force team. They don't have a single guy that has seen minutes that is north of 6'7", and I think that Lindenwood is going to hold in there in a game that I think is, quite frankly, going to be a little bit sad to watch. We've got a pair of teams that have a rough time getting going on offense, but both teams are also really rough on defense as well, and Lindenwood I do think is going to be giving up some points, so I did set my total at a 135. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the over. I know that going to Air Force, going to Colorado Springs is tough, but just laying 16 points here is too many. I'm going to be taking the points with Lindenwood, set them as an 11-point dog, and the over. 7:15, 7:16 on the betting board. Central Florida is going to be playing us to Cal State Fullerton. Fullerton is between a 10.5 to an 11-point underdog with your total 143.5. I did set Central Florida as a favorite of 11 points. So the 10.5 that I'm seeing, that is a max I'm willing to lay, but at current numbers, would be willing to lay that number. You've got a Central Florida bunch that has really prided itself on defense the last 2 seasons. Last season, they were a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, going up against a Fullerton bunch that has a nice scorer in Max Jones. Max Jones, a 6'4" gentleman that actually played at the D2 level out in Tampa, Florida. So he's got some connections to the state. Last season shot about 39.5% from 3, down a little bit with his 3-point shooting percentage through 2 games, but it's been a primary scorer for this team. And then down low for Fullerton, Grayson Carper He's been able to give you 8.5 rebounds per game after he was a little bit more of an off-the-bench big man for the team a season ago. 6'6" season ago, did shoot about 40% from three, but Central Florida did a nice job bringing in some nice scores of their own. Last year, Jalen Sellers was north of a 40% three-point shooter at Ball State. He's had 45 points in his first 2 games with Central Florida. You've got Jamari Allen, who at UMKC was a good scorer. Abrima Diallo, he's a 7-footer that comes in from San Jose State to be able to see him a little bit of rough and tumble because they do lose a lottery pick in Taylor Hendricks that was Mr. Do It All from a season ago, but you still have quite a few guys that have been a part of this just overall fulcrum last few seasons that I do think are going to be able to do a good job of elevating this team. I do take a look at someone like Darius Johnson, who has been in the fold for quite a while, has been a part-time starter for the team the last few seasons. Not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but he's able to hold the ball. With having Sellers in the fold, I really think that elevates his game, and on top of that, you bring in Damari Langford from Boston College to be able to help out this backcourt as well. With this Fullerton bunch, you really don't have a ton of size. I do like the overall versatility that Vincent Lee is able to get you. He's a solid defender, and bring in Dominic Bruton from Alcorn St, but I think that he's going to have a little bit of a tough time transferring up a level, so it is a circumstance where Fullerton, I did have to set them as an 11-point underdog, so here at 10.5, going to be willing to lay the number. Central Florida, team that really prides itself on defense, and with Fullerton losing their top scorer in Latrell Wright St, I think that they're going to have a tough time putting the ball in the basket. Set by total 135, diving in on the under, and willing to lay the number with Central Florida. 7-17, 7-18 on the betting board. It is Indiana playing us to Wright St. Wright St looks to be the right side as 11.5 to 12-point underdogs. Total is 150.5. Did set my total at 147.5. Got a little bit of a battle between the tortoise and the hare. The last few seasons, Wright State, one of the more up-tempo teams in all of college basketball, and ever since Mike Woodson has gotten it down in Indiana, the team has been pretty solid with regards to their defense. I don't want to give them short shrift there. The offense has been taking a little bit of a nosedive, so I did have to set my total at 147.5. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the under for Indiana. They're going to be able to win the battle down low. Khalil Ware is a former top 25 recruit that has looked good thus far. 18 rebounds, 4 blocks in the first 2 games of the season, really not turning the ball over. The one problem that you have with Khalil Ware is that it just doesn't feel like he plays with the other bigs necessarily terrifically, because you've also got out there Malik Renew, who just looks like a turkey with his head cut off, just has no idea what he's doing. Peyton Sparks was very productive at Ball State a season ago, missed the first game of the season, limited to just 9 minutes in that game against Army. I think that he could perhaps be able to play alongside Khalil Ware a little bit better, but you still have your question marks with his backcourt as well. Trey Galloway, very good shooter for this Indiana team. Last year shot 46% from three-point range, and you get Xavier Johnson back at the fold, but Xavier Johnson has always had his turnover woes. And then Mackenzie Mbakbo, I mean, he's someone that I've got my question marks with as well. And for Wright State, you've got Tanner Holden, who last time he was in the Horizon League 2 seasons ago was absolutely lighting it up for 20 points, 7 boards, spent last year at Ohio State, just really didn't get in off the bench, but I think that he and Trey Calvin going to be able to play in tandem very well. Calvin, a combined 55 points in the first 2 games of the season. Last time he played alongside Holden, had about 14.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 2.5 on 38% three-point shooting. This is a very good duo. Wright State, they're going to lose the battle down low, but you still have some size. With 6'8", Brandon Noel is able to give you 6 boards, is able to pop some threes. AJ Braun is right around 6'9". Doesn't pop the 3 ball, but is able to give you some nice rebounding. It looks like he's a little bit improved as a shot blocker as well. Depth is a little bit of an issue with this Wright State team. You need someone like a Andrew Wellajay to be able to step up, but that said, this is an Indiana team that right now looks all sorts of rudderless and just frankly is not very well coached. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Wright State, set Wright State as a 9.5-point underdog. And with this total, I do think that Indiana does a solid job on defense. I think that they slow things down, but I think they themselves can have a little bit of a tough time putting the biscuit in the basket. So I'm going to be taking a look at this total under, set my total 147.5, and we'll take double figures with Wright State. 719, 720 on the betting board. Louisiana Monroe is going to be playing us at Louisiana Tech. LA Tech finds themselves as favorites of 8.5 points. Your totals between 137.5 and 138. With Louisiana Tech, I set them as 6.5-point favorites. So I am going to be willing to take the points with Louisiana Monroe. With Louisiana Monroe has been a topsy-turvy last few seasons as they actually got things going towards the middle of Sun Belt play last season. Then they had a big giant fall off. The big key for them, they need Tariq LaCour to really take over this game. He is their primary scorer. A season ago was able to log about 14.5 points per contest, solid three-point shooter. They are going to probably lose this rebound battle down low, but it's not like Louisiana Tech has massive size. Now, good news for Louisiana Tech, they've got Daniel Bacho now eligible. Gotta wonder if Daniel Bacho is going to be playing his full allotment of minutes. This is going to be his first game action, but he's now been cleared by the NCAA. That is absolutely massive for this LA Tech team, and that has been taken into account because before they were using 6'8" Trevon Magnum as their top rebounder. I mean, he last year at Louisiana Tech had about 4 boards, was more of a guy that stretched the floor, shooting 37% from three-point range, so that's going to be able to elevate their play in the post. You've also been able to have Jalen Henderson come in and give this team some great production at the non-D1 level. He tore it up. Right now he has 5 of 7 from 3. Got to expect the 71% three-point shooting to fall off a little bit, but all in all, like what I'm seeing out of he, along with Isaiah Crawford, who had about 14 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shot 42% from 3. Is a little bit of a combo player, but for Louisiana Monroe, you've got Nika, and then the last name has about 15 letters. The gentleman that comes in from overseas, 10 points per contest. He's able to do a solid job. I like Nika and his game. We're not going to disrespect him by trying to pronounce that last name, but down low, 6'11", Jerry Ngakpat. If he's able to give you just a little bit of production, if he's able to just be molded a little bit, because he was very raw coming in from, I believe, like Africa. I mean, that's a guy that can really be able to give you a little bit of something down low as well. And it's a Louisiana Monroe team that does have guys that are able to light it up from three-point range. They do need to cut down on the 20 turnovers that they've had here in the first 2 games of the season, though one of those games was against Houston. That's a big reason why their numbers looked a little bit dwarfed from what they should be. And for Louisiana Tech, they don't necessarily have a ton of depth as well. So I do think that with this Louisiana Monroe team, they are going to be able to hold in this game. I'm going to be willing to take 8.5 with them. Have to wonder how Daniel Bacho looks night number 1 for this bunch, so I am going to be taking a look at the points. I did set my total at a 140.5. I do think that with Louisiana Monroe, it's going to be a little bit of a rough go of it for them on defense this season, because they are probably going to give up some second and third chances on the glass. So going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Monroe. 621, 622 on the betting board. Neutral court game between Denver and SIU Edwardsville. Edwardsville finds themselves as favorites of 1.5 points, only seeing an opener at DraftKings. Because these two teams are playing in a back-to-back, you're probably not going to find a lot of openers until the AM at total on this game at DraftKings. That is at a 149.5, and on this one, I did set SIU Edwardsville as a 7-point favorite. I am going to be willing to take them in this ordeal. With SIU Edwardsville, they've got a lot of chemistry and a lot of pieces back from a season ago. Shamar and Lamar Wright, I believe that those are the sons of Lorenzo Wright. They are both back, and both of these guys stand right around 6'7". They're able to let it fly from three-point range. Now, in terms of the neutral court environment, by the way, this is going to be in Mobile, Alabama, so neither team really gets an edge there. And for Denver, they are a team that is looking to push the tempo a little bit, which is why I do fear that the back-to-back might be a little bit more hurtful for them rather than an SIU Edwardsville team that in past years they've been able to elevate a little bit more with regards to their defense. Taku Tamnemo, he for this Denver team has been tremendous going into yesterday. 22 points, 13.5 boards, shooting 40% from three-point range after he began his career in the Pac-12, and also beginning his career in the Pac-12 over at Utah. Jackson Brenchley, he's at 6'5", a little bit of a point forward for the team, 7 assists and 2 turnovers in the first 2 games of the season, but it's never really been a great three-point shooter. I like what Tommy Bruner is able to provide as well, but you just need a little bit more depth with this team. You need someone like a DeAndre Craig, the freshman, to be able to give you a little bit more of something. And for SIU Edwardsville, they've done a good job of being able to develop that depth, as DeMarco Minor has been able to give you a 6+ rebounds per game, and then you've also been able to get just a lot out of Rayshon Taylor in general. Has become a primary scorer for this bunch last season. 15.5 points per contest, mid-30s three-point shooter, which is big because with this SIU Edwardsville team, they've always had a little bit of a tough time with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. If you're able to get a little bit more out of someone like, say, Brian Taylor, the second who last season was an afterthought at UW Milwaukee, you're really staring at something with this team. SIU has been able to elevate their defense. Denver, they're a little bit more rough with regards to their defense, and for Denver, they did score north of 80 points in their first 2 games of the season, but I do think that for SIU Edwardsville, they're going to be able to slow this game down a little bit, and because it is a back-to-back, I do think that is going to be hurting the offense just a skoge in this matchup as well. So it is a spot where I did set my total at a 147, diving in on the under. And when it comes to this Edwardsville team, set them on a 7-point favorite. So looking at Edwardsville, and I'm going to be diving in on the under. This is going to be the DK Network write-up pick, 723, 724 on the betting board. Missouri, they throw it. They're facing off against Minnesota. The St with the smallest strengths in the union. Minnesota is a 2-point home underdog. Your total is 144 to 145.5. My write-up pick, that is going to be on Missouri. I did set them as 8-point favorites. With Missouri, I think that they are going to cause all sorts of matchup issues for a Minnesota team that is looking to change the point guard from a season ago. Talon Cooper, under the radar, was actually doing a very good job of dishing it out for Minnesota. Problem was, he had nobody to really dish it out to, but for Talon Cooper last year, he had nearly 10 points, 6.3 assists, and 2.1 turnovers per game. Now it's Elijah Hawkins who's running the point guard spot for Minnesota. And for Hawkins, when he was out there in the MEAC last year, he was able to log 12.9 points, 6 assists, and shot 46.5% from 3. He also led the country in turnovers, and now they go up against a Missouri team that last season was 3rd in the country in terms of steals forced on a per-possession basis. And it seems like a recipe for disaster. On top of that, the biggest kryptonite that you had for Missouri last year was rebounding, and they addressed that with Connor Vanover now being eligible. He was suspended for the first 3 games of the season. 7'5" load of a man that comes in from Oral Roberts. He's capable of popping threes if he really wants to, but he was able to give the team about 3 blocks per contest, 6.5 rebounds. That is going to be able to help out against a Minnesota team that is allowing about 15 offensive rebounds per game. 31% of opponents' missed shots are resulting in offensive rebounds. That's big, as Missouri last season was 17th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. And for Minnesota, they surprisingly are a top 25 team right now in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. Hasn't necessarily been due to the 3-ball, though, and I do think that bringing in Vanover, that is going to be able to help out the rim protection and the overall down-low defense of this Missouri team. As for Minnesota, it's all based around Dawson Garcia. 45 points in the first 2 games of the season, and he might legitimately be the best player in this game. I actually really like his game. They also bring in Cam Christie, who I do think is going to be able to elevate this team. A skoge, 6'6" freshman that was able to give the team 18 points in his first game against UT San Antonio, but you really don't have a lot of depth with this team. Mike Mitchell comes over from Pepperdine. Braden Carrington, he's been someone that's been able to give a little bit of production to Minnesota, was more of a 6th man a season ago, but Minnesota a season ago was outside of the top 330 in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. I'm just not thinking that Parker Fox going to be really that elevator. Meanwhile, for Missouri, you bring back these guys like Sean East, Nick Arner, that were both able to give you 3 assists per contest, and the addition of Caleb Grill and the way that he's able to play defense should be able to help out Missouri to be able to hold down the fort and be able to get the job done. I did set Missouri as an 8-point road favorite. My DK Network write-up pick, that is going to be taking Missouri, and I do think that if you do find Minnesota down like 6-8 points with a minute remaining, you do get those late game fouls. Minnesota certainly not an up-tempo team, but Missouri certainly is an up-tempo team, and Missouri, we saw them be able to crank up the tempo in a lot of their games last season. I think that they're going to be able to do so here. So, going to be taking a look at the over, set my total at a 146, and my DK Network write-up pick, laying the deuce with Missouri. 725, 726 on the betting board. It is Nebraska, Omaha, and they are going to be playing against William & Mary. This is a true neutral court game, and right now with Omaha, they are 1 to 1.5 point underdogs. Totals anywhere between 148.5 and 149.5. I said William & Mary is 5.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. This is at Old Clune Arena, and Clune Arena, that is out there in the great state of Colorado. This is a part of the Air Force MTE, and I mean, that maybe helps out Omaha just a little bit because they're used to the travel, but I don't think it makes too much of an impact at all. Now, what I do like for Omaha is the fact that you got Markel Sutton along with Frankie Fiddler, who are a pair of double-figure scorers back from a season ago, and Sutton was able to give you 5+ rebounds per contest, but even with that, I don't think that this is going to be a great team down low. this has been a bunch that has really struggled with the 3-ball throughout the last few seasons. Credit where credit is due for Omaha. Only about 9.3 turnovers per contest in their first 3 games of the season, but they go up against a William & Mary team that they've done a good job with their on-ball defending. 56 points or fewer surrendered in 2 of their first 3 games. Now, gave them 95 to George Washington. I think that George Washington going to be a very solid offense this season, but I take a look at the backcourt, and I just think that William & Mary is going to be able to overwhelm on that front. You've got Trey Moss, who comes over from South Florida, where he was a little bit of an afterthought, has become a nice scorer for this team. Gabe Dorsey is a nice sharpshooter, might be the best one in this game. Last year shot 44% for 3 with about 11 points per contest. Now you don't necessarily have a ton down low for William & Mary with Noah Collier from last season being out of the fold, but I do think that you're going to get a little bit of something from the other Dorsey and Caleb Dorsey, who began his career at Penn State. Actually saw a few starts for Penn State a season ago before getting injured. I think that he's going to be able to help this team out down low. And then you've got a little bit of a combo player, Jack Karzinski, who's come in as a 6'7", little bit of a do-it-all player, 6 boards, 7 points, able to pop threes. Last year shot about 35.5% from distance. I think that that's just too much for an Omaha team that doesn't really have a lot of depth to be able to overcome William & Mary. One of the slower teams in terms of tempo in all of college basketball, Omaha, they've looked to slow down a little bit as well. Now, both of these teams quite inefficient on offense, to say the least, but I think both teams having to play at elevation as well. That is going to mess them up just a little bit in this matchup. So this is an ordeal where I did set William & Mary as a 5.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the very small number with them. And with this total, I think that's set too high on unfamiliar surroundings to both of these teams. Semi-total 137.5, diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with old William & Mary, the best tag team out there. You get both. Not just William, not just Mary, both when you play the 1 to 1.5 with them. 727, 728 on the betting board. UT Arlington is on the road facing up against New Mexico. New Mexico is 13.5 to 14.5 point favorites. Your total is between 148 and 148.5. I can only send New Mexico as a 13-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. I'm sort of thinking that Jalen House is going to be out of the fold for this one. And even if he does play, you have to question how close to 100% he's going to be, because we saw Jalen House miss some games last season. You have to wonder if this is really a lingering issue. And it's one of those, I need to see it to know that he's back to 100% sort of thing. So I would rather be erring on the side of being a little bit too low on New Mexico rather than being a little bit too high. And for UT Arlington, this is a bunch that is going through a little bit of a coaching change, and I like the fact that they brought in DeJuan Gordon. Gordon has been just a well-traveled man, began his career at Kansas State, he was at Missouri, he was at New Mexico State. I think he spent time at Oshkosh, Wisconsin, so he has been all over the place, but has supplied 25 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season. Now, he's going to have his hands full with Nelly Jr. Joseph, who comes in from Iona. Over at Iona a season ago, 15 points, 9 boards, a block, a steal. He's able to do a little bit of everything, and even if you do have Jalen House out of the fold, there's still a dynamic scorer on the flip side, Jabal Mashburn Jr., who just has 22 points in the first 2 games of the season, and in my opinion, you can tell that he just is not the same player when House is out of the fold, but at the same time, he is going to be an elevator for the team, and I do think that the real X factor here for New Mexico as well, Mustafa Amzil. He comes over from Dayton. Last season at Dayton was a part-time starter that was able to give you 9.5 points. Shot about 37% from 3 as a 6'9", nice combo player. But I do think that for UT Arlington, regardless of if House is in / out of the fold, they are going to be able to hold in this game because they do have a nice little new look backcourt to be able to pair with their main low post player, Shamar Wilson. Wilson a season ago was their primary scorer with 11 points, 8 boards per contest. He missed quite a few games last season, and you could tell just what sort of an impact he had when he was in / out of the fold. On top of that, you now have Cade Douglas in there, who missed the first game or 2 of the season. In 13 minutes in his season debut, he had 18 points. This is really one of the best sharpshooters that the team has, and you've been able to get a lot of the true freshmen and Ky Williams, someone that comes in from the great state of California, went a little bit under the radar in recruiting. Pair that up with Aaron Cash, who comes over from Texas A&M, and I do think that UT Arlington, staring at a team that can be able to elevate out there in the WAC. They're looking to play quite a bit more up-tempo, and with New Mexico, even with Nelly Jr. Joseph in the fold, this is a team that I think is going to struggle on defense throughout the season. Now, their game against St. Mary's went well under the total. That's because, in my opinion, St. Mary's just does a rock-solid job with their defense and making things slow and grimy. So I do think that we're going to see things be a bit more up-tempo in this one. Semi-total 151, looking at the over, and and anything north of 13 won't take the points with the Mavericks of UT Arlington. 729, 730 on the betting board. It is Montana playing us to North Dakota State. North Dakota State finds themselves as underdogs of between 8 and 8.5 points. Totals between 137.5 and 138. I did set this Montana bunch as a 7-point favorite. So being able to get north of 8, I am going to be willing to take the points. Very interesting to see an old Summit versus Big Sky battle this early on as well. And with North Dakota State, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up on the glass. Now, always a word of caution with North Dakota State. They do treat non-conference play sort of like glorified exhibition, so they're probably going to be doing a lot of experimentation, but regardless, I do think that Andrew Morgan is going to be able to do a good job against Deshaun Thomas down low. Both of these guys for their respective teams last year were able to log about 6 rebounds per game. Got a little bit of a size advantage when it comes to Morgan. And then for North Dakota State, this team is really going to be built around Bowden Skunberg, a 6'5" combo guard that last season shot about 39.5% from 3. Now with North Dakota State, needs to find a primary ball handler. They have been lacking that the last few years. We're hoping they have found a little bit of somebody with Amari Wheeler-Thomas, who's been able to give you about 3 assists per contest. Not a great scorer, but a guy that's able to put in there right around 9.5 points per contest, and is able to get Tate Jarvis Miller into the fold, who shot in the mid-30s with about 8 points per contest a season ago. Meanwhile, for Montana, they lose Josh Bannon, who at 6'10" was a little bit of a point forward that was able to pop 3, so Aiden Moody needs to have the ball in his hands quite a bit more, and has been able to supply 18.3 points per contest in the first 3 games of the season. On top of that, they now get Josh Vasquez back at the fold, who has been a career about 36% three-point shooter, has been all over the place throughout his career. Not a guy that plays well on the ball, but off the ball is able to free himself up for some relatively good three-point looks. But with this Montana team, it feels like they're trying to mix and match as well with some of the pieces that they've lost over the last 24 or so months. Byron Whitney, he's able to give you a little bit of facilitation as well, but both of these teams feel a little bit rudderless, trying to find who that main ball handler is going to be, and I do think that North Dakota State, having Morgan down low, that's going to allow them to hold in this game. So I did set my total at a 135, here to 137.5 to 138, diving in on the under. You've got a Montana team that's one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. North Dakota State has had their most success playing a little bit more slowly, so I'm going to be diving in on the under, and with Montana, could only make them a 7-point favorite, so taking the points with North Dakota State. 731, 732 on the betting board. Montana State is going to be on the road facing off against California. Cal is a 11 to 12 point favorite, and your total between 141.5 and 143. I did set Cal as a 6.5 point favorite, so going to be willing to take the points with Montana State. This Cal bunch clearly is not the same with some of the guys that they were hoping to have in the fold, not get that waiver. Jalen Tyson being the main of them, and with this bunch in Cal, I do think that they're going to be able to rise up because Mark Madsen, he is a tremendous coach, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time. Meanwhile, for Montana State, they did lose their coach in Danny Sprinkle in the offseason, but because they stayed in-house, they were able to keep a bunch of solid players from a season ago, like Robert Ford III, who he a season ago was a little bit of an afterthought, but you go back to what he did at Idaho State for the 2020-21 and 21-22 season, shot in the high 30s from three-point range, gave you well north of 5 rebounds per contest. That one season in 2020-2021, 3 assists per contest. He's able to do a little bit of everything for this team. And then on top of that, you got a nice knockdown scorer in Patrick McMahon, who at 6'7" last season was able to shoot 50% from 3, granted in a very small sample size, but now in a larger role, he has really been able to elevate. He's on a career 39% three-point shooter. First 2 games of the season, a combined 29 points. And Trey Patterson is someone that's also able to knock down the threes. Tyler Patterson, I should say, shot about 37.5% from 3 2 seasons ago. He's capable of giving you about 7 to 8 points per contest. Cal's going to be able to control things down low. They've got Pardas Amek, who the last time he was playing under Mark Madsen during the 2021-22 season, 19 points, 13.5 boards, a block per contest, and shot 43.5% from 3 at 6'11". But this team is trying to find their rhythm in terms of the backcourt. You bring in Jalen Cone, who was able to put up great numbers at Northern Arizona, but can sometimes get a little bit reckless with the ball. Devin Askew has really never found himself after being a 5-star recruit at Kentucky to begin his career. So I do think that the camaraderie of Montana State going to be able to win out. Montana State should lose the battle down low, but I think that they hold up in the backcourt as well with all that Cal has been going through. So did set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to take double figures with Montana State. Set my total at 136.5. It's also diving in on the under. Now we go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 733, 734, Vermont and College of Charleston in a neutral court battle. With Vermont They are between 1.5 and 2-point underdogs. Totals between 146.5 and 147.5. I said Charleston as a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It's a very interesting Charleston group that had a tough time against Duquesne a few days ago, but I just attribute that to Duquesne being a really good team rather than knocking what I think is one of the better mid-majors in all of college basketball. We saw what College of Charleston was all about last season, and I think that Vermont, a very new-look team that loses 5 out of their top 7 scorers from a season ago, is going to have a tough time here. They have Matt Verotto back in fold, and with Verotto, I mean, he was tremendous for Vermont last season, shot about 41.5% from 3, 9 points, 3 rebounds per contest at 6'8", and in conference play was averaging more like double figures, but now he's going to be paired up with 6'10" Ante Brazovic, who he's capable of popping threes. He's been able to do a nice job on the glass for this bunch the last 2 seasons. His versatility, very hard to match up with. Rain Smith is a good knockdown scorer for Charleston, and Charleston, they just come at you in waves. They've got about 9 or 10 guys in their rotation that are all going to play at least 15-plus minutes this year. CJ Fullerton, who comes in from the Patriot League after he logged over at Lafayette, 10 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. He's a textbook perfect fit for this system. You've got Frankie Policello at 6'7", is willing to rebound, is a good primary scorer as well. And for Vermont, got to be wondering about the backcourt. You bring in Jameer Bogues, who I liked him over at Charleston St. I just don't know if he's a great fit over at Vermont. At Charleston St, 9.5 points. He was able to log 2 steals, shot about 36.5% from 3, but Vermont has never really been about generating steals. This is more of a tough on-ball defensive team that is looking to be very efficient on the offensive side of things. So I do feel like you've got some misfit parts. Brenton Mills, after he was very solid at Binghamton to begin his career, he just could not find it at Bowling Green. He, thus far this season, in 2 games, has logged 6 points. You've got to be wondering what's happening there, and I think that Charleston just in better footing as well. And also, you got to give Charleston a little bit of a leg up here because Charleston, well, that's much closer to Conway, South Carolina than Vermont. So I did set Charleston as a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the small number. And Charleston, they were a top 45 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis last year. Vermont, each of the last 5 years, outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. I'm going to be diving in on the under 7 by total 139, and I'm going to be willing to lay the small number with Charleston. 735, 736 on the betting board. Wyoming is going to be playing in St. Louis. This is also from Conway, South Carolina, with Wyoming a 4.5 to a 5.5 point underdog. Totals between 149.5 and 150.5. Thus far, the young guys for Wyoming have actually stepped up for this team, but I do think that the rubber is going to be meeting the road a little bit more in this one. I did set St. Louis as a 6-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take them. Have been mildly surprised by how the non-Division I transfers of Wyoming have been able to perform. They brought in a lot of guys from like the junior college level, and thus far they've been able to do a nice job of being able to mix and match. Their main guy thus far has been Sam Griffin, who was playing over at Tulsa last year. He's a double-figure scorer for a Tulsa team that, to put it politely, they were not great, but Akil Cott, he's someone that comes in from the non-Division I level. He's been able to supply 37 points in the first 2 games of the season, but I take a look at this Wyoming team, and I don't think that the nearly 48.5% three-point shooting that they've had thus far this season is sustainable. They do bring back Brandon Wetzel from a season ago, and Wetzel is about a 38% career three-point shooter. I think that he might be able to maintain a percentage like that, but also, this is a bunch that they don't have a ton of rebounding as well. Cam Manwanu, who is a true freshman, he's been able to do a solid job, 10 boards per contest, but Terrence Hargrave Jr., I think he's going to be a little bit of a hard matchup. He's someone that has been with this program for quite a while, and last year, about 6 points. He's capable of popping threes, but not amazing at it. 4 rebounds per game, but this year he's been able to elevate his game, and then got one of the better knockdown shooters in all of college basketball, Gibson Jimerson, 6'5" gentleman that a season ago shot 40% from 3, and in all 4 of his years at St. Louis has shot at least 39.4% from 3, has been highly consistent from the outside, and for St. Louis, they were cut a break in the back half of the offseason, being able to bring in Mike Meadows. You can tell that because he was a little bit of a later transfer, it's taken him a little bit of time for things to click, but the good news is, even though he hasn't delivered a ton of production, he's also not turned the ball over as well, and that's been big for St. Louis. They've been able to cut down on some of the silly mistakes from a season ago, even though they do lose Yuri Collins, who led all of college basketball in terms of assists a season ago. This team has done a nice job being able to keep things in line, so this is a circumstance where I do think that St. Louis is going to be a little bit more of the disciplined team, and for Wyoming, I just don't think that they have enough on the glass to be able to maintain. Wyoming has been playing a little bit more slowly the past few years. I do think that St. Louis going to be bogging down their tempo a little bit as well. So I did set St. Louis as a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with them. Semi-total 144 once again. Got a neutral court game, some unfamiliar surroundings, so diving in on the under and diving in on St. Louis. 737, 738 on the betting board. It is Coastal Carolina. They are pretty much a home team here against Wichita State. Wichita State, a 7-2 and 8-point favorite. And your total, that is anywhere between 143.5 and same size of 145. I set my line at a 7.5. So we're in between the 7 and the 8, and this opened up at a 6.5. If we can have this be like 7 across the board, I'd be willing to lay it with Wichita State. But personally, I would rather take 8 rather than lay 7 with Wichita State, just because, once again, I mentioned it with Coastal Carolina. This is pretty much your home court now. I can't award them the full 3 points for home court advantages because you do have to sell tickets to all of the teams that are coming over for this event and everything like that. So you've got the logistical issues there. But that said, with this Coastal Carolina team, are they going to be a little bit rough on defense this year? They most likely are, but at the same time, I do think that they did a good job of being able to overhaul the roster a little bit and just bringing guys that are a little bit more of a fit with the system, because you tell that Coastal Carolina last year, they just got out of sorts with their defense. They were a bottom 35 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and now they go up against a Wichita State team that they've got Kobe Rogers now finally eligible after he was barred by the NCAA from playing last year. That was a crying shame, but he has come in and has been able to give the team a combined 48 points in the first 3 games of the season after 2 years ago at Siena. 14 points per contest, shot 43% from three-point range. Do like his overall game, but for Coastal Carolina, the difference maker for this team, Kevin Easley, he was able to give the team 20 points in the first game that he played. Now, he is a very well-traveled gentleman. Began his career over at Chattanooga, played at TCU, spent the last 2 years at Duquesne, and really just didn't get out there on the floor for Duquesne last season due to injury. But 2 years ago in the Atlantic 10, 10.5 points, 6.5 boards. At 6'7", he's able to pop some threes. On top of that, down low, you've got Janika Ojiako. Hopefully I said that correctly, coming in from George Mason. And he's a relatively solid player with 6'10" size that should be able to do a nice job on glass against a Wichita State team that they just don't necessarily have much outside of Quincy Ballard. Ballard has been able to average about 10 rebounds per contest. He's done a good job of coming in after being just really an afterthought over at Florida State the last few seasons. I think that that'll elevate this Wichita State team, but a lot of moving parts for the team. And I do like Paul Mills as a coach. He brings in Arnold Beverly, who was a starter over at Miami a few seasons ago. Penny Photo, he had 6'11", is able to give you a little bit of versatility as well. But with Henry Abram being able to dole out the ball with Coastal Carolina, and this being in their home state at a number between 7 and 8, like I'm seeing right now, I would rather take 8 rather than lay 7 personally. And with regards to the total, did set it at 141.5. Coastal Carolina, they're getting back to their roots of playing a little bit more defense. I like the rebounders that they have to be able to prevent a lot of second and third chance opportunities, really on both sides. So I did set my total 141.5, diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take 8 or more here with Coastal Carolina. 739, 740 on the betting board. It is a Liberty, and Liberty is going to be playing against Furman. Another game out there in Conway, South Carolina. Liberty is a 1 to 2 point favorite, and your total between 145.5 and 147. I think that this is too high of a total. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. I set my total at a 136.5, and the big reason why. Liberty just threw out the dawn of time since, really, you saw Bobby Ritchie come over for this program. This has been a super duper slow team. Ritchie is a disciple of Tony Bennett for Liberty in the last 7 years. They have ranked 275th or lower in terms of total possessions per game, and now they lose a top 5 scorer in all of college basketball last year in Darius McGee. Even though they lose Darius McGee, this team is not going to experience too much of a fall because this is such a good system in general that they've got so many guys that are just going to play their role. I did set Liberty as a 2.5 point favorite. As a result, Brody Pebbles has been able to step up as a result of the loss of McGee. He's been able to give the team a combined 33 points in the first 2 games of the season. Liberty has always been a relatively solid and efficient 3-point shooting team. Through 2 games, they're shooting 45.8% from 3. We should see a little bit of a fall off there, but so many of these guys have just bought into the system. Someone like a Kyle Rohde, who stands right around 6'7", 6'8". He gives you like 3 assists, 5 rebounds, a single-digit amount of points per game, but is able to make a little bit of an impact. Now you're seeing a little bit more out of Zach Cleveland, another 6'7", little bit of a combo player that's able to do a nice job down low. Silo Robinson has good versatility as well. Liberty is still able to go like 8 or 9 deep. They all have guys that really buy into their role. And for Furman, this is a big-time transition for the team as they really only return one of their double-figure scorers from a season ago, and Marcus Foster was able to do a solid job with 10.5 points, shot about 36% from three-point range. You also do bring back J.P. Peaks. J.P. Peaks a season ago, he did average about 12 points per contest himself, 4 assists. That's pretty solid, but a lot of the good rebounding they had from a season ago, that is gone because they could have Jalen Slauson on any given night go out for a triple-double. Not having him in the fold is a little bit rough. They do have Carter Witt, a former top 250 recruit that actually saw some starts at the point guard spot for Wake Forest early on in his career. He's been able to do an okay job of being able to dole out the ball for Furman. And what Furman really does well is they do a good job of making their two-point shots. You can always talk about their three-point shooting, but they do a good job knifing inside. But Liberty, with that strong sort of poor man's pack line defense, I do think is going to be able to do a solid job. I absolutely love the way that this team is able to play in general, and I don't think that we're going to be seeing too much of a fall off from this Liberty team. They've got such a great system with Richie McKay. I think I might have called him Bob Richie but a little bit before. I get my Richies confused, but that said, I do think that under Richie McKay, they are going to be able to do a solid job, be able to get the job done in this circumstance. So I did set Liberty as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with them. Liberty, I think it's their slow grinder style. Going to be taking a look at the under, and I am going to be taking a look at Liberty. 741, 742. We now head to the Charleston Classic between North Texas and St. John's. Neutral court game where St. John's is between a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite. Totals between 137 and 138.5. I did set my total at a 135, so I'm going to be diving in on the under. North Texas is going to play a little bit faster this year now that Grant McCaslin is out of the fold because they were literally a full possession per game lower in terms of their tempo than every other team in all of college basketball. So I do think that we're going to see that go upwards just a little bit. And St. John's, they look sloppy in that game against Michigan, but if you dive into the shock value numbers, St. John's actually got some really good looks. They just didn't fall on that day, and I do think that Joel Soriano is going to be able to manhandle things down low. A man that averaged a double-double a season ago with about a block and a half per contest. Now, I do think that a little bit under the radar for North Texas is what they were able to get in the back half of the season last year out of Mule Sissoko. Sissoko had 30 rebounds in the final 3 games of that NIT. He's been able to give the team about 7 boards per contest thus far this season, and I do think that he's going to be able to do a solid job as a nice rim protector for this team, and I do like what Aaron Scott is able to provide in the backcourt as well. Aaron Scott, a little bit of a 6'7" do-it-all player that shot 40% from three-point range with 5.5 boards a season ago. They bring in Robert Allen, who was at Ole Miss a season ago, but Robert Allen does not have as much versatility as a lot of the players in past years at North Texas, and just losing Tyler Perry is rough for this team. Meanwhile, for St. John's, along with Joel Soriano, Chris Ledlum is able to give you about 9.5 rebounds per game. Jordan Dingle, he was a 23.5 point per game scorer that is transitioning to a little bit of a different role because he was really the man over at Penn. Now he's more of a second wheel, third wheel, with Dennis Jenkins being the main man to dole out the ball for St. John's. So this is a team in a little bit of transition, but I do think that St. John's going to be able to win from within. I think that they are going to be just such a well-coached team when it's all said and done, even though they did look sloppy in that game against Michigan. There's no denying that, but I do think that Slick Rick going to be able to figure it out and get the job done here. I set St. John's as a 5-point favorite, going to be willing to lay 3 to 3.5, and did set my total at 135, so diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take St. John's playing up to 4.5. 743, 744 on the betting board. LSU and Dayton do battle from Old Charleston, and LSU a 1-point underdog. Your total is between 134 to 134.5. I did set LSU as a 2-point favorite. I am going to be willing to take them. I had to downgrade Dayton because they are now without Malachi Smith for the remainder of the season. He was supposed to be the main point guard for this squad, and I just feel for the kid because he missed so much time a season ago as well. And for LSU, ugly loss to Nichols. I think we're starting to find out, though, that Nichols is not the world's worst team in the world as well. You still can't take that loss if you're LSU. There's no denying that, but I do think that they are going to be able to figure it out a bit more in the backcourt. I do like what you're able to get from a scoring perspective in Jordan Wright. He, a season ago over at Vanderbilt, was a part-time starter that, from three-point range, buried about I would say 32 to 33% of his triples while he was over at Vanderbilt. Last 2 seasons was a double-figure scorer with about 5.5 rebounds per game. You've also got Will Baker, a true 7-footer that's able to pop threes as well, and I do think that Carlos Stewart going to be able to put the team on his back in this one as well. Over at Santa Clara a season ago, logged 15 points, 2.5 assists, nearly 2 steals per contest on 40% three-point shooting. Now, the facilitation is in question because you do lose Adam Miller from a season ago. You have not been able to get some of these guys that are two-time transfers to get out there on the floor like Jalen Cook, so that's been a bit of an issue for this team. But for Dayton, they're dealing with the same issue as well, as it looks like they're probably going to be rolling with Javon Bennett as one of their main facilitators, who was a nice player over at Merrimack a season ago. He had 3.5 assists per contest and 3 steals with a Merrimack team that was very much defense-oriented, did not provide a lot of offense. So I do think that this might be a little bit more of a slow grinder game, as Dayton, they always do play at a little bit of a slower style. Big thing for Dayton is that they're going to have the best low-post player in this game in Deron Holmes, who is capable of popping threes, but last year, 8 boards, a block and a half per contest, picking up right where he left off last season. The question is, what are you going to be able to get out of Kobe Brea, Kobe Elvis, pair of guys that shoot it relatively solidly from three-point range, but at the same time are very inconsistent as well, along with Enoch Jeeks, who was Mr. Do-It-All over at Robert Morris, but now is taking on a little bit of a smaller role. I did set my total at 134 here at 134.5. Going to be willing to dive in on the under with LSU. Recognize that Nichols loss was a little bit less than savory. I'm willing to buy low on them. Taking LSU outright on the money line and taking a look at the 134.5 under. 745, 746 on the betting board. Towson and Houston do battle from Charleston, with Houston an 18 to a 19-point favorite. Totals between 127 to 127.5. I think we've gone a little bit far here. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Towson. I did set them as more of a 15.5 point underdog. For Towson, this is a slow and controlled team that is sort of like a poor man's Houston, for a little bit of a lack of a better term. They do have someone in Charles Thompson down low that was able to give you about 7 rebounds per contest. The biggest thing for Towson is that they're trying to overcome the fact that they no longer have Cam Holden in the fold, who was a do-it-all player that actually had at least 1 triple-double last year. Might have actually had 2 triple-doubles. That guy had a lot of ability, so that has been a little bit rough for them to be able to overcome. But you do have a Houston team that is in a little bit of transition themselves, though the transition going very, very well. You bring in LJ Cryer, one of the better knockdown shooters in all of college basketball, that logged double figures over at Baylor a season ago. Damian Dunn looks like he's going to be able to get her done in this system. And then you've got the likes of it, Jawan Roberts, who last season gave the team about 6 to 7 rebounds per game, and Javier Francis. He does a really good job down low. He's been able to supply the team with 2 blocks, 2 steals per contest. Good versatility as a 6'8", do-it-all sort of rim-protecting big man. And I think the real X factor for this team is Terrence Arnaud, who he comes in after being a top 50 prospect a season ago, played very seldom last season. Now I expect him to elevate and give another option to the tremendous point guard in Jamal Shed, who's not scoring a lot right now, but he's averaging 4 points, 4 boards, 6.7 assists, 3.3 steals, and 3 turnovers per contest. He just does it all for the team, and the big key for Towson, being able to find that main trigger man in the backcourt, because they did lose Holden from the season ago. Dylan Williamson, the true freshman, has been able to do a solid job being able to ease off the load a little bit, about 3.5 assists per contest out of him. This team did lose quite a bit of three-point shooting a season ago, though Tyler Tejada and started out shooting 77.8% from three-point range. I think that that's going to be falling off a little bit, but this is a relatively young Towson team built around more of their big men like Messiah Jones and company. I do think that the rebounding itself going to be able to keep Towson in a game that I think is going to be rather slow, rather grimy, but I think we've went a little bit too low. I did set my total at 127.5 because Houston is really able to bomb it from 3, even in a low possession game. I do think that they knock down just enough threes to be able to get this total over at a 127, and with Houston, I make them a 15.5 point favorite. So take the points with Towson to go along with the under. 747, 748 on the betting board. Utah is going to be playing against Wake Forest out in Charleston. Wake Forest is a 3.5 to a 4 point underdog, and your total is anywhere between 150.5 and 151.5. I did set Wake as a underdog of 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Utah. Utah's a team that is really impressing me, and I do think that they've got a lot of upside. Their defense was in the top 25 last year in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. It's just avoiding some of those droughts, for one, that they experienced last year, and being more consistent on the road. You'll find that with both Utah and Colorado, teams that play at more mountainous areas at a little bit of elevation. They oftentimes are a little bit more inconsistent, but Raleigh Worcester, he is not the worst. He is one of the better point guards that you're going to find in all of college basketball. A season ago, about 8.5 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. Now he's been able to pick up about 3.5 steals per contest, and that's an X factor for Utah, because the one thing that Utah did not do a season ago was generate a lot of turnovers. They have been able to do a little bit better job this year. And then you've got Brandon Carlson, who's looked very solid as a 7-footer, is capable of popping threes, giving you 7 boards, multiple blocks per contest. His brother Ben is able to give you some nice rebounding as well. And then you're able to get about 9 rebounds per contest out of Ky McKeon. There's just so much size for Wake Forest to match up with that it's going to make it rough. You've got Cameron Hildreth, who is really that feature player. 2 years ago, it was Alondes Williams. Last year, it's Tyree Appleby. Wake Forest always has that one go-to guy that they want to do a little bit of everything. And this year, it's Hildreth, 22.5 points, 4 boards, 4 assists early on. But this team is missing Tabari Monsanto, a very good knockdown three-point shooter, and they still have not been able to get out there in the full, the 7-footer from Gonzaga and Efton Reed. So they do still have Hunter Salas, who comes over from Gonzaga. Should be able to elevate this backcourt a little bit, but has never lived up to his top 50 billing coming out of high school with this Wake Forest team as well. They are just brutal on defense. Meanwhile, Utah, their forte is defense. So I do find this to be a little bit of a battle of opposites. As a result, I did set my total at 146.5. I do think that Utah going to get a little bit more of their tempo in this game. And I do think that with Wake Forest being in unfamiliar surroundings and having won their biggest offensive test of the year, that they're going to struggle. So I did say Utah's a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with them and going to be taking a look at the under. 749, 750 on the betting board. We had to Barclays Center for Oklahoma State and St. Bonaventure. The Bonnies are 2.5 to 3 point underdogs with your total between 137.5 and 138. I set this line at 2. St. Bonaventure is out there in the great state of New York, so I awarded them about 1 point for a home court. You can't go a full 3 or anything like that, but I do think that it should be taken into account just a skosh, and I do think that that'll keep them stuck with an Oklahoma State team that may look to be a better 3-point shooting team than a season ago. I need to see a little bit more out of them to believe it. Bryce Thompson has really been able to elevate his game thus far this season. First 2 games, 36 points. He last year shot there about 37% from 3. Right now he's shooting north of 60% from 3. We should be seeing a little bit of a fall off. Taking a look at the shot quality data of Oklahoma State, they got quite fortunate in their last game against Sam Houston where they knocked down 16 threes, right now shooting 39.5% from 3 after they were a bottom 75 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage a season ago. I think they're a better 3-point shooting team than they were a year ago, especially with bringing in Javon Small from East Carolina, where last season shot about 33.5% from 3, 16 points, 5 boards, 5.5 assists, a little bit of a do-it-all player. And then you got Mr. Wright in John Michael Wright, who was very good when he was out there in the Big South a season ago, was able to acclimate to the Big 12 level. But I do take a look at St. Bonaventure. After they got a little bit embarrassed against Canisius, I think that this is a big wake-up call for them with the Bonnies. You've got Charles Pride, a good primary scorer that began his career at Bryant, who's been able to spearhead a St. Bonaventure team that should be able to give you a little bit more scoring in general, as you've got Azamvivus, hopefully I'm saying that correctly. This guy was known as Jan Farrell a season ago, so I don't know where this name change comes from, but that said, he was able to log about 9 points, 6 boards, and shot in the high 30s from 3-point range as a 6'6" combo player a season ago. Pride and Micah Adams-Woods are good primary scorers. They're able to throw out the ball a little bit. And then Daryl Banks III, I think, is really the elevator for this backcourt as well. Last season, it was able to give up 15.5 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists, stat sheet stuffer for a Bonnies team that they always do a good job of priding themselves on defense. St. Bonaventure, a more controlled team, and got an Oklahoma State bunch that they never look to get out of control themselves. I think Oklahoma State is going to cool down with their shooting. And keep in mind, Barclays Center, not necessarily the world's greatest shooting environment if you take a look at past college basketball games. So I do think that this total is set a little bit too lofty. Set my total at a 136. So I'm going to be willing to dive in on the under. And with regards to the side, I set St. Bonaventure as a 2-point dog. So getting north of 2, going to be taking the points with the Bonnies and the under. And this is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. It is 7:51, 7:52. Notre Dame and Auburn do battle for Barclays Center. Auburn, a 14.5 to a 15-point favorite. And your total between 144.5 and 146.5. And with Auburn, I did set them as a 14.5 point favorite. So at 15, I'd be willing to take the points with Notre Dame. By the way, we've got a Wright game, so we've got one more after this, a game from Hawaii. But that said, you do have this Auburn team who's been able to do a very solid job of having their big men down low really be able to eat. Dylan Cardwell is able to give you a block per contest, and then G&I Broom. This is a man that's cleaning up last year. About 14 points, 8.5 boards, a block and a half per contest, if not more. He's now able to pop some threes, so that's good versatility. Going up against a Notre Dame team that they're well coached. Micah Shrewsbury knows what the heck he's doing as a coach, and Marcus Burton has come in as a freshman, and he's looked rock solid. He's been able to put up a combined 46 points in the first 2 games of the season. Problem is, the team in total has been averaging about 65 points per contest, so they need a little bit more out of the ancillary pieces. You bring in Julian Roper from Northwestern. He's a good fit with regards to the system, but you've got a Notre Dame team that right now is shooting about 25.5% from 3. Micah Shrewsbury's system really does rely upon good three-point shooting. It just doesn't have a lot of bodies in general to be able to utilize right now, and other than what you're able to get out of Burton along with Kerry Booth, who at 6'10", he's able to pull in there some boards and has actually been the best three-point shooter for the team. You don't necessarily have a ton, but that said, this is an Auburn team that they just are brain dead with regards to basketball. I guess you call it savvy, for lack of a better term. You do have Chad Baker-Mazzara, who I like him coming up from the non-Division 1 level. He was at the junior college level after a few seasons ago. He was actually a solid player. Over at San Diego State at 6'7", he's able to space out the floor. This is a much better Auburn shooting team than they were a season ago. They bring in Denver Jones, who really hasn't made too much of an impact at all on the team, but the guy that has been able to make an impact, that'd be Aiden Holloway, a true freshman that has been able to shoot north of 40% from 3, 30 points in the first 2 games of the season. Auburn should be able to get it done, but Notre Dame is going to play at a slow and controlled tempo. Auburn, they're a relatively good defensive team as well, and I just think that this is a number that is getting a little bit too lofty. So I did set my number at a 14.5. Here at 15, going to be willing to take the points with Notre Dame. Notre Dame, I think, is going to be playing at a slow grinder style, and I do think that Auburn going to tighten up the screws on defense after what we saw in that Baylor game. So going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Notre Dame at 15 or more. And 753, 754 on the betting board is a right-in between Niagara, who's on the road facing up against Hawaii. Rainbow Warriors are between 12 and 12.5 point favorites. Totals anywhere between 129 and 130.5. Bookmakers literally forgot about this game, which is why it's a little bit of a writing game and why I got confused a little bit earlier. But that's it. With Hawaii, I could only set them as a 9.5 point favorite. So being able to get double figures with Niagara, I'm going to be willing to take the points for Niagara. It was a less than savory loss that they took to Bucknell a few days ago, but this is still a team that they play under control. They play very methodically, and I do think that they're going to hang with a Hawaii team that has yet to play a Division I opponent, which I find to be a very, very bold strategy. With Hawaii, they bring back quite a few guys from a season ago. They do lose a little bit of rebounding from a year ago, but I do think that Mo Sek, when he saw minutes, he's a true 7-footer that is really able to do a nice job of being able to defend the rim. He's really going to be able to have a little bit of a bust-out season after last year. He only played like 9 minutes per contest, but you tell that in those games where they actually gave him minutes, he was rock solid. You also have back at the full Bernardo da Silva. Did Silva last year, 6.5 boards, 9.5 points. Not a guy that's really going to be able to pop it from 3-point range, but a guy that is able to give you quite a bit more on the offensive side of things is Noel Coleman, who in 2 out of the last 3 years has shot at least 39% from 3-point range, double figures in each of the last 2 campaigns as well. And then they also bring in a McCoy, in Justin McCoy, who began his career at Virginia and North Carolina. Didn't necessarily see significant minutes for them, but a former top 150 recruit, a guy that at 6'8" is able to pop a few threes as well, is able to do a good job on the glass. That should be able to elevate this Hawaii team, but still, I do like for this Niagara team, Obeng Menza, who comes in from UMBC. He's able to play a little bit more up-tempo than what we've typically seen out of Niagara, but with Niagara, you know that they're going to calm things down, and they've got a nice spot-up shooter in Luke Bumbalow, who 2 seasons ago at Ball State averaged 11 points on 36% three-point shooting. He's able to dole it out a little bit as well. They do have a guy in the backcourt in Braxton Bayless as well that I think is going to be instrumental in the team, replacing Noah Thomason, who led the team in points with 19.5 per contest, which for a team as slow as Niagara, that's just absolutely remarkable usage in general. But Bayless a season ago was able to give you about 5.5 points, 3 boards. He's a relatively good defender as well. I think that this is going to be a relatively grimy game, and for Niagara, having to travel out to the island. That's pretty much a 5 time zone difference. That's going to take a little bit out of them, but I do think that because this is going to be a game with a limited amount of possessions, that'll keep Niagara within this number. I set this line at 9.5, taking a look at the under, and with Niagara, I'm going to be willing to take those points to go along with an under as I set my total at a 129.5. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
This starts with 306-581, 306-582. Neutral court game in Florida between Northwestern St and Maine. Maine hopes to not get Maine as 6 to 6.5 point favorites. Your total between 147 and 148.5. I set my line at 4, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Northwestern St. Northwestern St, very much a new-look team. They lose their top 3 scorers from a season ago. They're under the tutelage of a little bit of a different coaching regime, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold snug in this one. You've got a Maine team that has a little bit of difficulty knocking down threes, but the hallmark of this Maine team is being able to generate turnovers, and Kellen Tynes is a master of it. He led all of college basketball in terms of steals per game a season ago with 3.3, averaging 3.3 steals through 3 games thus far this season as well, but also someone that hoisted up threes at about a 30% clip a season ago. Maine was able to elevate themselves a little bit down low. They bring back someone that was able to give them about 5 to 6 rebounds per game in Kristen Firebergs, but on top of that, Keon Burns, who comes in from Long Island, he should be able to give the team a little bit of a loof down low, and then you've also got Mr. Peter Filipovsky. Filipovsky last season was a reserve that was able to give the team right around 6 rebounds per game, and on the flip side for Northwestern St, the big thing for this team is just being able to hold up on the glass, and they've got someone that has been able to take over and become a do-it-all player in Jamison Epps. He's a junior college transfer that to be able to give the team a little bit north of 10 boards per contest, capable of popping threes. That's not necessarily his forte though, but overall has been able to do a nice job in the just combo position, I guess you'd call it, because he does a little bit of everything. And then they bring in Dwayne Posey from Alabama State, who a season ago, he was able to deliver nice versatility at 6'7", 7.5 points, 5 boards, doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3-point range. And for Northwestern State, they probably are going to fall a little bit victim to Maine and their ability to be able to take the ball away, but they themselves are generating 10.5 steals per game. I think that this is going to be a really sloppy game between two teams that don't have necessarily a lot of 3-point shooting, and I do think that Northwestern State going to be able to drum up a few of their own turnovers to be able to hold in this game. I did set Maine as a 4-point favorite, so going to be willing to take 6+ with Northwestern State, and with the total set mine at a 136, also diving in on the under 306-583, 306-584. Bryant is on the road facing off against Boston U. Boston U, a 5 to 5.5 point home underdog. Your total is between 134.5 and 135.5. I think this is a little bit of a motivation spot here for Bryant. Bryant officially announced that Phil Martelli Jr. is going to be the full-time coach. He was the acting coach for what we were all seeing in the Jared Grasso situation. So I actually think that this is going to be a little bit of a rallying cry to use a little bit of that sort of a motivational angle. And I did set Bryant as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I feel like with Martelli Jr., this team is going to play significantly slower than they did under Grasso. We've seen that in the first few games of the season for Bryant. You don't oftentimes see them play a 66-57 game like they did against Rutgers. Now, granted, Rutgers is a very solid defensive team, but you tell that things have calmed down a little bit, but they still have the best go-to scorer in this game in Sharif Gross-Bullock, who season ago averaged 17 points per contest, shot 40% from 3. He's putting up darn near similar numbers thus far this season. You do have to wonder if Bryant is going to go into their bench a little bit more because so many of the guys like Doug Eater and company just did not see a lot of minutes last season. Meanwhile, you've got someone in Connor Weathers who comes in from UMass Lowell. He was a little bit of an afterthought last season as well. They're starting to give him a few more minutes. I also do like the fact that you've got Mr. Daniel Rivera, who a season ago, he was at the non-Division I level, transfers up and has been able to do a nice job with 13 points, 7.5 boards per contest thus far. And for Boston U, they just don't have a lot of production in general. They pretty much lose all their top 5 scorers from a season ago. They're looking to Miles Brewster to be able to take hold of this offense after he shot about 34% from 3, just under 5 points per contest a season ago, but you just don't have a lot of size as well. You're right now looking to someone like Otto Landrum, who's 6'9" and very inexperienced to be able to give you rebounds. I think that Bryant, just with the fact that they've got guys that have been through wars and guys that have been able to have success at the D1 level, they are going to be able to get the job done. I think that they're going to be fired up for Martelli Jr. I set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and when you have a game that you think is going to be decided by about 6 or 7 points with a minute left to go, you get a lot of late game fouling. And I do think that Bryant, because of the fact that they played against two very very, very slow teams to begin the season. They're going to be kicking up the tempo just a touch. So going to be taking a look at the over semi-total at 140.5 and taking Bryant here, made them a 6.5 point favorite. 306, 585, 306, 586. North Florida is going to be playing us to Presbyterian. The Blue Hose find themselves as a underdog of between 1.5 and 2 points. Your total is between 145.5 and 147. I said North Florida is a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I do think the Presbyterian getting built up a little bit too much because of that win against Vanderbilt. They were very opportunistic with when they were playing Vanderbilt with all those guys getting scratched, and I do think that they might be for a little bit of a rude awakening against the North Florida team that has quite a bit of versatility. Jake Vanderheygen is someone that at 6'9" is able to hoist away from three, currently shooting 69.2% from three. That should be seeing a little bit of fall, but like him, as he comes over from the bracket bus in Bucknell Basin, you've also been able to have some good production out of Ja Enzi, who was a very much afterthought for North Florida season ago, but he's been able to log about 10 points per contest here early on. It looks like they're going to be featuring him along with Dorian James in the backcourt. James has been in college basketball for seemingly like 500 years, but season ago was able to log about 5 rebounds, 6 points per game. Not a guy that's going to take off the top of a defense with his 3-point shooting, but at 6'7", just does a good job of being able to stuff the stat sheet. Meanwhile, with Presbyterian, do have to have your question marks as to what you're going to be able to get out of a true main facilitator, because they just really don't have one. You've got Marquise Bennett, who a season ago was able to do a solid job with about 9 points, 2 assists, 5 boards. He's a better 3-point shooter than most of the guys on the roster, but he needs a little bit of help. Samaj Teal has been trying to provide a little bit of that as a up transfer from the non-D1 level. He's been able to supply about 13.5 points per contest, but also with Presbyterian, they've lost a lot of their good rebounding with Owen McCormick now being out of the fold. Trevon Reddish. Rowan has always been a little bit of stat sheet suffer for this team. He's been experiencing a downtick in production, really, each of the last 4 seasons that he's been on campus. And it's been a little bit less than terrific. And for Presbyterian, I do think that the bottom is falling out after they had a really nice night number 1 win, but not really much else to be able to back it up the last few years. I did set North Florida as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. North Florida, a very up-tempo team. Presbyterian, throughout their just entire tenure under this current coaching regime, ever since they lost Dustin Kern to Appalachian State, has been a very slow team. Set my total on 144.5, diving under, and want to lay the number with North Florida. 306, 587, 306, 588. Virginia is playing host to Texas Southern. Texas Southern between 19.5 to 20-point underdogs. Your total is anywhere between 130 and 130.5 with Texas Southern. I did set them as 19.5 point underdogs. Being able to get 20, that is my buy point on them. For Virginia, they do lose a few pieces from a season ago, most notably Ky Clark, but Reese Beekman has been able to do a nice job of being able to dole out the ball. And even though Virginia loses guys like Francisco Carfero and company, Ryan Dunn has been able to get her done in terms of being able to hit the glass at 6'8". He was a bit of an afterthought a season ago, but this year, 9.5 points, 8.5 boards, capable of popping threes. That's not necessarily his forte, though, but for Texas Southern, what I think is going to be able to keep this team in the game is that Virginia doesn't necessarily have that ideal size anymore. Kenny Hunter, who comes in from Louisiana Tech, I think that he's a big elevator for the team. He was a part-time starter on Conference USA with 6 points, 5 boards, and a block per contest at a pretty good level of competition. That's big for a Texas Southern team that they always think with their 3-point shooting. We're just going to call it what it is, but they bring in Jonathan Cisse, who a season ago at Incarnate Word was able to log 16 points, 3+ assists. He's able to pop a few threes. PJ Henry does need to trust in his teammates a little bit more. In the last game that we saw PJ Henry, he just hoisted up shot after shot after shot. I think they took something in the neighborhood of like 24 field goals for 12 points. They need to get other guys into the fold because you got Shaq's son in there and Shaquille O'Neal, who, I mean, he's certainly not Shaquille O'Neal, but you know what? He should be able to do a little bit of something down low for the team. You on top of that have a guy that goes under the radar in Kellen Farquhar, who at 6'6", he's able to pop a few threes as well. Flip side for Virginia, you do have to wonder how efficient the 3-point shooting is going to be moving forward. They've looked relatively solid here in the beginning part of the season, shooting 43.5% from 3, but what comes up must come down. Jacob Groves is a 6'9" combo player that season ago over at Oklahoma shot about 38% from 3. Oklahoma's a little bit more of a slow tempo team, so he's been a good fit, but right now he's shooting in the neighborhood of about 77% from distance. We should be seeing that fall off a little bit, though. I do like the game of Isaac McNeely. I do think that this thing gets slowed down. Texas Southern has always had difficulties putting the ball in the basket, and for Virginia, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, set my total at 127.5. Going to be diving in on the under, but at 20+, taking the points, as I do think that Texas Southern plays relatively good on glass. So taking a look at the under and the points. 306, 589, 306, 590. NJIT is on the road facing off against American. American is between a 9.5 to a 10-point favorite, and total on this game are between 138.5 and 140. NJIT with a rather unsavory loss over the weekend in which they got completely rocked by St. Peter's, but I don't want to be overreacting too much of that. I did set them as an 8-point underdog, so going to be willing to take 9.5 to 10 against an American team that is one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. It's going to be really hard for them to win by margin, not just in this game, but for the entirety of the season. And you tell that for American, they are missing Johnny O'Neal, who transferred over to Santa Clara in the offseason. Someone who had 6'10", was able to do a nice job of being pop threes. Now you still have Matt Rogers in the fold, who had 6'9". Last season he shot about 41% from three, 14 points, 6.5 rebounds per contest, and Elijah Stevens and Colin Smalls are able to play in tandem in the backcourt. Smalls plays a little bit more off the ball, about 37.5%. That's why he shoots from three, about 10 points per contest, and then Elijah Stevens, more around 4 assists, 10 points per contest, a little bit less of a three-point shooter, but you don't necessarily have those ancillary pieces to be able to elevate this team. You've got someone like a Lincoln Ball who's been able to give you a few rebounds at 6'6", but not necessarily a primary scorer. And for American, this team over the last few years has been towards the top of all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis, trading turnovers to be able to get good looks at the rim from three-point range. Meanwhile, for NJIT, it's a Hess test. Adam Hess, he was able to really emerge towards the back half of last season, shot 43.5% from three, 10.5 points per game, but really did a lot of his damage towards the back half of the season. And I do think that Elijah Buchanan, coming over with the Manhattan interim coach from a season ago, is going to be able to play in tandem as Buchanan began his career at Manhattan, and he, a season ago, was limited to just 5 games. Take a look at what he did during the 2020-2021 campaign, though. 11.5 points, 6 boards, a block, a steal per contest. That's a 6'5" do-it-all player. I think that American going to have a tough time defending that. Now with NJIT, they are shooting 59.5% of the free throw line with 16.5 turnovers per game. This is a little bit of a sloppier team, but American has had their turnover woes as well. NJIT is having a tough time putting the ball in the basket. I fully expect American to have some of their offensive woes that they have scored 63 points or fewer in 2 out of their first 3 games of the season. So I foresee a little bit of a slog coming. I set my total at 132, diving in on the under. I think with NJIT, Buchanan, I think is going to be able to keep this team lively. So going to be taking a look at the points, set my line at 8, and going to be taking a look at the under. 306, 591, 306, 592. It is Alcorn St, and they are going to be playing on the road against UAB. UAB, a 17.5 point favorite, and your total on this game getting an anywhere between 150 and 151. With UAB, I set them as favorites of 15.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Alcorn State. Alcorn State doesn't have that one primary guy that you look to be able to really bail them out, but this team is one of those classic whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of squads, as they do lose Dominic Bruton from a season ago, a double-figure scorer that is now over at Ky Fullerton, but they did retain quite a few of their guys from a season ago. Jeremiah Kendall has been able to give you 49 points in the first 2 games of the season. We shall see a fall-off there, as a season ago he was the team's primary rebounder with about 11 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, but Brian Joshua is someone that's able to give you a double-figure amount of points. He's able to throw out the ball just a little bit. You don't have one main point guard with this team, but you pretty much have all the guards in tandem being able to pass, and I really do think that Jalen Hawkins can be able to elevate this program as well. Limited just 6 games due to injury a season ago at Morehead State, 2 seasons ago at Norfolk State, another HBCU. He was able to average 13 points, shot about 35.5% from 3. Season before, shot 44% from distance, so he gives this Alcorn State team a level of scoring that they haven't had in past years from the outside. Meanwhile, the UAB does feel like they're starting to play a little bit more slowly. Andy Kennedy does a great job of catering his system around what he actually has in the fold, and with this UAB team, they do lose Jolly Walker, one of the best scorers in all of college basketball a season ago, and I would like to see a little bit more out of Daniel Ortiz, who shot 40% from 3 seasons ago at North Alabama. He's only been able to give the team 9 points in the first 3 games of the season, but they bring in Alejandro Vasquez and Yaxel Lenborg, 2 of the top 10 junior college transfers in all of college basketball. These guys have some good versatility. You've got someone in 6'8", 6'9" combo player, Javion Davis, who's been able to do a nice job on the glass. Even though you don't necessarily have as much shot blocking as you did a season ago, you do have a guy in Eric Gaines that's able to impact the game. 18 points, 3 boards, 3 assists, a mid-30s 3-point shooter, and I do think that for UAB, they should be able to get it done, but UAB, you can tell that they just don't have the same level of talent a season ago. The defense does improve. It looked to be very much improved improved in regulation because the Bradley game went to overtime. They have held their opponents to 64 points or fewer in 2 of their first 3 games of the season. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under. I did set my total at a 143.5. Both Alcorn St being able to get north of 16, going to be willing to take those points as well. 306.593, 306.594. Texas Tech plays those 2. Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi between a 23.5 and a 24-point underdog. Between 139 and 139.5 is your total. Set Texas Tech as a 20-point favorite, being able to get north of 21. Going to be willing to take those points with Corpus Christi. I like the Texas Tech team, and I really like Ky McKeon as coach. But much like we see with a lot of these lower tempo teams, hard to win by margin with a coach in McCaslin that was dead last in the country in terms of total possessions per game when he was coaching at North Texas a season ago. And it looks like Texas Tech is going to be in a slow, grimy style once again this year as well. You've got Warren Washington, who's a true 7-footer, is able to do a nice job down low. He's been able to give the team a combined 17 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season. Do like what you're able to get out of Pop Isaacs as well. Isaacs a season ago shot about 38% from 3, 11.5 points per contest, so he's a big-time elevator for the team, but he brought in a lot of good glue guys. Someone like a Joe Toussaint, who's over at West Virginia. Not a primary scorer, but is able to do an okay job of scoring, gives you a few assists. Darian Williams, just a winning player in Nevada. Mid-33-point shooter, 7.5 points, 7.5 boards, doles out the ball at 6'6". I mean, it's a well-put-together team, but for Corpus Christi, you also have a system that is still in place from what we saw from Steve Lutz. They stayed in-house when they made that coaching change, and I do like the fact that they brought in Marion Humphrey, a guy that began his career at San Diego along with UT Arlington season ago for the Mavericks, had about 2.5 assists, not a great 3-point shooter, but does a good job of being able to value the ball. You've also got a nice scorer that's giving you about 11 points per contest, and Jordan Roberts, who a season ago was a little bit of a off-the-bench 38.5% 3-point shooter. You still have good overall scoring with Corpus Christi, and they've done a nice job of taking care of the ball. They are averaging also about 12 steals per contest. Now, keep in mind, their 3 opponents were non-D1 teams, so big, giant asterisks there, but I do think that with Corpus Christi, they still have some solid 3-point shooting. They still have some solid backcourt playing. Well, Texas Tech is going to be able to win the battle on the glass. I just don't think that there's enough possessions in this game for them to be able to win by this big of a margin. Did set my total at 136 as well, because I do think that this is going to be a slow down game. Going to be taking a look at the under and the points with Corpus Christi. 306.595, 306.596. Nichols is going to be playing against South Alabama. This is a true road game out there in Mobile for Nichols, as South Alabama, the home team, a 7.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 140. Only DraftKings has a number up on this game because this is once again part of a back-to-back, so you're going to notice a lot of books are not going to have this up until the early AM. That said, with South Alabama, did set them as an 8.5 point favorite. I do think that Nichols coming off of a back-to-back is going to be a little bit more worn down because they do play at quite a bit of a higher tempo than at South Alabama. So I am going to be taking a look at South Alabama, a team that they actually lost to a non-Division I school in Mobile to begin the season. But with South Alabama, you still have a few guys that are back from a season ago. Judah Brown was able to be a nice scorer for the team a season ago, and they're going to be looking to Gator Dunn with Isaiah Gator, who he's coming from the non-D1 level. He's been able to give the team about 11.5 points per contest. And South Alabama has really struck some gold with some of those non-D1 transfers. I think the big key for this team, getting Marshall Kearing to be able to be online a little bit more. He spent a few years with the system, just has not really gotten it down pat quite yet. But at 6'9", his career about 32% 3-point shooter, and should present some issues to a Nichols team that they've always had a system back when they were under Austin Klonch of generating a lot of steals. It appears as though they're going to be maintaining that this season as well. But in their first 2 games going into yesterday, 19 turnovers per contest. Their 3-point shooting, it is up from a season ago. They bring in someone they like in Jalen White. White, it was beginning his career at Ohio. He was just glued to the bench last season. This year, they're featuring him much more in his career, 45% 3-point shooter. You've also got someone in Jamal West, who first 2 games of the season was able to supply 38 points, a guy with quite a bit of ability. But this is a team that is running a little bit of a shorter rotation for how fast they're looking to play, and I think that that is a big disadvantage to them in this sort of a situation. I do think that South Alabama, a slower, more controlled team that really values defense a little bit more, going to be able to win out in this ordeal. So it is a spot where I did set South Alabama as an 8.5 point favorite. I could see quite a bit of late game fouling in this one, as I did think that Nichols going to be able to crank up the tempo a little bit more, but because I do think that Nichols is going to have a lot of unsightly turnovers, that's going to lead to easy buckets for South Alabama to also be able to push this total over. Semi-total 142.5, so out of 140, looking at the overhand, willing to lay up to 8 with South Alabama. 306-597, 306-598. You've got Chicago State on the road facing off against Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois between 14 to 15 point favorites. Totals ending between 132.5 and 133.5 with Southern Illinois. You do have to wonder how they're going to be adapting to life without Marcus Domask, a good do-it-all scorer that I absolutely loved, and now is over at Illinois after he was supplying about 15 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. Now, Xavier Johnson has shown the ability to be a good ball handler in his time at George Mason last year. Was very much an afterthought in terms of scoring, but you tell that he was a good glue guy for the team. Now he has to be a little bit of a do-it-all scorer, so do have to question how that is going to be going for the team, which is a big reason why I'm going to be willing to take the points. But on top of that, Jayshawn Corbett, I think, is going to be able to do a nice job down low for the Chicago State team. Last season was able to supply the team with just under 9 rebounds per contest. He's able to pop threes at about a 32% clip at 6'7". That's going to be hard for Clarence Rupert to match up with. Rupert was very solid for that St. Peter's team that made the Elite Eight a few seasons ago, but not a guy that is necessarily going to be a super elevator. He's a nice defensive player, but doesn't necessarily grab a whole ton of boards as well. And Wesley Carded is going to be a hard matchup for the Southern Illinois team as well. Carded a season ago shot about 34.5% from three. He's a top 200 recruit back from the class of 2021, 16.5 points, 5 boards, 3 assists. He's able to be a nice primary scorer for this team. Now, they do lose Bryce Johnson, who was a nice 3-point shooter for this bunch last few seasons, and that does cause a little bit of question mark where you're going to be able to get that shooting from the outside, but they do bring in Noble Crawford, who was glued to the bench over at LIU the last few seasons, but has good ability and just athleticism at 6'5". The twins that they brought in, those former top 10 guys that were playing over at Overtime Elite, they are not eligible yet. I believe it's the Booley brothers, so you do want to be taking note there, but for Southern Illinois, I just do have a lot of question marks where this team goes moving forward. Without Marcus Domask, you've got Eby, who's been able to give you a few rebounds per contest, but the level of play that they've got in the backcourt, just not what it has been in past years. So I did set my line more around 8. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southern Illinois, and with the total, set it at a 132. Southern Illinois, throughout the last few seasons, has been one of the more slow and controlled teams in all of college basketball in Chicago State. They're content with not playing up tempo as well. So going to be diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Chicago State. 306-599, 306-600. Tulsa is going to be playing us to Jackson State. Jackson State, a 7.5 to an 8-point underdog. Your total between 145.5 and 146.5. For Tulsa, they have covered 5 spreads since the beginning of the 2022-23 season. Has not been going well under Eric Conkle. Now, what I like about what Eric Conkle did in the offseason is he brought in guys that he's familiar with, and he's trying, for lack of a better term, to get back to happy, as he did a very solid job being able to eye some talent with Kobe Williams coming in. He was a 15-plus point per game scorer over at Louisiana Tech last season. He also brings in a guard that we have yet to see this year, and I think that he's going to be back out of the fold as well. One of their primary 3-point shooters last few seasons at Louisiana Tech and Keston Willis, but that said, he does bring in Isaiah Barnes as well, a former top 200 recruit who began his career in Michigan, just couldn't get out there on the floor. He's looked very solid in his first 2 games of the season. 13.5 points, 8 boards, 6'7", a little bit of a combo player that has a few question marks with regards to his 3-point shooting ability, but still should be able to give the team a level of talent that they just simply did not have a season ago. They also bring in PJ Haggerty, who was at TCU a season ago. He's another one of those up transfers that was pretty much glued to the bench. So you've got Tulsa, who's pretty much gambling on some of these guys that were highly regarded guys that were at power conference levels and just could not get minutes in general. And that's a lot of what you do see with these SWAC and MEAC teams. And for this Jackson State bunch, they were really banking on Deshaun Ruffin, a former McDonald's All-American, to be able to elevate the team. Unfortunately, suffered an injury early on, but Ken Evans has really become a primary scorer for this bunch. He's been able to supply 22.5 points per contest through the first 4 games of the season. Last year was one of their primary guys when he was averaging more like 11.5 points, shooting 35% from 3-point range with this Jackson State bunch. They do lose a few guys from a season ago. Romeo Mansell, he was one of their top rebounders, one of the few guys that was able to give the team north of 5 rebounds per game. Same goes for Trace Young. He ran out of eligibility, so Jackson State going to be up against it a little bit down low, but I do like the backcourt of this team. You've got someone in Colty Young who's able to give you some solid 3-point shooting. Last year, about 34% from distance, 11 points per contest. Chase Adams is someone that does a good job of being able to dole out the ball, and if you can get Johnny O'Neal to start grabbing rebounds the way that he did while he was over at Alabama State last year, when he was logging about 8 points, 7 boards, was able to do a solid job with a little bit over a block per contest. I do think that the Jackson State team has a chance to be able to cover another game in Tulsa. They've just invented ways to not be able to cover college basketball games over the last 2 seasons. And I do think that Jackson State, a very battle-tested team, going to be able to hold snug in this one. I did set my line at 6, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Jackson State with regards to the total as well. Set my total 146. It's also looking to play quite a bit more up-tempo, and though they gave up just 53 points to Central Arkansas, still my question marks with that defense, and Jackson State has given up 80-plus in every single game, but that said, they've been held below 70 in each of their last 3 as well. So here at a 146.5, going to be diving in on the under. Would rather have that under rather than the 145.5 over to go along with the points with Jackson State, and we'll wrap things up with 306-601, 306-602. Arizona State is playing OC UMass Lowell. UMass Lowell between a 5 to a 6-point underdog, fills anywhere between 139.5 and 141. We shall see how UMass Lowell is able to piggyback off of prosperity after they were able to go on the road. They knocked off Georgia Tech, but I think they're live once again. I'm not going to take them on the money line like I did against Georgia Tech, but I set my line at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points. I do think that UMass Lowell going to have a little bit of a tougher time down low than they did a few days ago, but I still think that Abdul Kareem Koulibaly is going to be able to have some success down low. We saw him at Lowell last season be able to give the team 11.5 points, 7.5 boards, guy that began his career at Pittsburgh, and as a matter of fact, when he was at Pittsburgh a few seasons ago, was a starter for the team, but Ky McKeon has really been able to elevate as a scorer. Last year, he was just a do-it-all guard that gave you like 10.5 points, 3.5 assists, was a little bit of liability from three-point range. Still not the world's greatest three-point shooter, but through 3 games, he's averaging a little bit over 20 points per contest. He's been able to also help out Yuri Covington, who plays a little bit more off the ball, is able to knock down a few threes in his own right. He's been a little bit cold starting up, but I think that should be coming along as well. And then Max Brooks is an all-AEC defender that piggybacks well off of another 6'7", 6'8" combo player, Quentin Mincy, who gives you a little bit more versatility as he shot 44% from three-point range a season ago. And for Arizona State, they do appear to be a little bit lost on offense. Jose Perez joined the team like 3 weeks before the start of the season. You could tell that he's still trying to get down the system. He's had 10 points in the first 2 games of the season. And for Arizona State, they've actually done a good job of being able to generate steals. They're getting about 9 per contest, with Frankie Collins being able to give you 6 steals in the first 2 games of the season. But this is a team that really doesn't have a lot of three-point shooting. They bring in Kamari Lands, who he was over at Louisville a season ago. He's been their top scorer through 2 games at Louisville last season. Shot 32% from 3, 6 points per contest. And we all know what that Louisville team was a season ago. I do think that they should get a bit more out of Zane Meeks, guy that began his career and have had a 6'9" combo player that throughout his career has been about a mid-30s three-point shooter. So I think that is going to be elevating the level of play for this team a little bit. And Jemiah Neal is someone that I'm relatively high on as well. Was a bit more of a primary reserve a season ago that was able to give the team a few boards, shot about 30% from 3. I think that he's going to be able to elevate off of that as well. But Arizona State, not a team that's really able to bomb it from 3. I do like that they've got Alonzo Gaffney, a good rim protector down low. And with this UMass Lowell team, they do look to push quite a bit of tempo. They're very good with their defense, but they are not a team that's shy to play quite a bit more fast. And for Arizona State, this is also a team that, under the tutelage of Bobby Hurley, they are still a little bit more of a defense-oriented team this year, but they look to push tempo a little bit more last season. I do think that you get quite a few possessions in this game to be able to push it over. I set my total at a 143.5, looking at the over. Now with UMass Lowell, willing to take 4 or more with them. And now wrap things up for the Thursday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. A big thanks to Ky McKeon. Does amazing work over at the 3-Man Weave. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we will fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. Then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season, and that means I'm with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.